Yeah, they're finding out. I'll tell you that.
I used to make forts like this. I used to put like chairs together with blankets on top, and my parents are also fascist pieces of shit, and they also tore down my fort.
I think that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
So you wouldn't have an issue if they were just sitting there protesting, but because they built a camp to protest continuously, that it demands violent retaliation from the force. Like it justifies violent retaliation from the state.
Yes.
I think so, yeah. I do.
From the school.
Because like they have no right to do that.
He keeps making it sound like it's from the state. It was the school who decided that they shouldn't be protesting anymore. The cops start like grabbing people one by one and trying to take them out. Like this is the back end. They had this one tent that was here just kind of blocking cops from getting in, and they were stopping cops from taking down their border over on this end, but on the other end not so much. And so the cops were able to get by a whole lot quicker, and once they got to the protesters, they were just stopped by tons of people standing in their way, linked arm in arm. And that's what all of this is. They all came very prepared, actually. It was surprising how prepared they were. They all had goggles on, they all had face masks on, they all had helmets on, and they were all linked arm in arm. They had later they found tons of bags with tons of batteries and flashlights, and I think they even had like drills and shit. Like I don't know what they were planning on building in there. I maybe they were gonna build a fucking house or something. Kid Not Kin was talking for a while about the fact that they were building a non-binary poop bucket, that they were really upset that there were poop buckets for men and poop buckets for women, but there were no poop buckets for, like, at least specified for non-binary people. And so they had to get a poop bucket for the non-binary people. And I mean, I don't know why they don't have poop buckets for like the xenogenders as well. They should probably have a poop bucket for each and every xenogender. So if you're, a platypus gender, you gotta have your own poop bucket. A platypus gender is not gonna share their poop bucket with a zebra gender, and a zebra gender is not gonna share a poop bucket with a deer gender. What the fuck? Those genders are from completely different continents. How are they supposed to share poop buckets? So you really gotta. Once you go past the man-woman poop bucket dichotomy, you really gotta go all out. There's no, you've already started down the slippery slope. So yeah, eventually, the sun was up, I believe, by the time they actually got everybody out of there and got the whole place cleared out, and it was trashed. Like once they got all of those protesters off the lawn was trashed. It had so much crap on it, and so like tons of tents that were flattened and just trash everywhere. There's only 2 poop buckets there. Do you see that? Do you see how fucked up these people are? They only have 2 poop buckets. They don't have one for every xenogender. This is so disgusting. These people, they call themselves progressives. This is gross. But yeah, I mean, it didn't seem super violent, at least not from anything that I saw. The last couple of days when we've been covering this, every single day, most of what we've been covering is the fact that every single time there's some sort of protest, cops start reporting some wild fucking shit where they're saying like, oh, they were chanting death to Israel. And it's, when? Where? Why doesn't, there were like tons of reporters everywhere. Why did nobody hear this?
Like, I yell at my community all the time. I yell at them relentlessly when they engage in stuff, right? So I don't think I am audience captured at all in that regard. But my point
when
is,
they engage in
sometimes
stuff,
you find yourself taking stances that you may not have taken a year ago or even a couple months ago, because you're like, you get the warmness of like being in a community that's like advocating on your side unconditionally, fighting your battles. Asmongold's recent spree of I'm being canceled law. Yeah, I just like, I don't know. I think cancel culture is ridiculous. I've been quote unquote canceled a million times over. His chat call whoever was with the students a Hasan freak. It was a shithole. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's sad to see. Especially because like I don't think Gamergate 2 is like real, you know what I mean? I think it's just mostly just like a couple content creators trying to desperately do this thing.
I'd initially pulled this up because I thought that he was more so talking about him for a while in like engaging with specific stuff that he said. I thought that he was going to review his video.
And desperately like tack on anything they can. I'm not even talking about Asmon. And they will look at like actual content, will come around like, oh, it's popular, you motherfucker. Same as you feel. If Charlie Moist Critical
just got the video just sitting there.
I think the way I read it, one of the most unhinged right wing takes as it pertains to associate being pro.
The cops, yeah, it's like
see what's on Reddit chat when you've seen the clips.
It's like antagonizing the cops. Yeah, it's like it's a good thing that the cops took an L on that. Like, I mean, the cops didn't have to take an L on anything because they could shoot the protesters, but they don't do that. So
that's crazy. That's crazy. It's also like positively not Texas to just have this attitude. You know what I mean? I thought Texans don't call 911, you know? Hasan viewer. I mean, they probably aren't wrong.
Yeah, a bunch of people were banned at Asmongold earlier. Looks like Twitter is mad about me not supporting protesters' First Amendment rights to build a Rust base on campus and block students from going to class. Keep crying about it, guys. If you're loud enough, you might end up on tomorrow's video. A bunch of people really mad just about this review that he had right here as well. We had the Surfs, I believe. If you guys know who Lance from the Surfs is, he tweeted out Asmongold just looking at the protests with a happy face, and he called him a sick fuck. But his stream title is UCLA protesters fuck around and find out. And he just, yeah, it's just, if you're not watching and you're just listening, it's got a still of protesters getting arrested or a bunch of cops in SWAT gear and him sitting there smiling and looking elated. And so the lefties are not happy. It says, I thought the students were environmentalists, and then they show all of
taking a look around the encampment after police have gone through here and forced the pro-Palestinian demonstrators out. CHP tells me 100 people were taken into custody during this operation. It took about 3 hours. What a mess. Taking a look.
And then, yeah, this person said the cops did this, you toaster oven. The cops didn't do this. We could see it. We could watch it on camera. The cops did not do this. That's insane. First off, the cops did not build the fucking walls around this in the first place. The cops did not bring any of this shit to the campus. They didn't bring any of this here. They didn't bring an umbrella. They didn't bring a fucking non-binary shit bucket. They didn't bring all these massive boards to put up around as barriers. They didn't bring any of this. You can't blame the cops for any of this crap.
Back it up.
Okay, so this is police arresting an elderly woman, but you can see she just came over and just like hit them or something. I don't know what she did. It looks like she came over and pushed them or threw something at them. Like, it looks like she just shoved her finger into his chest.
Are you kidding me?
Okay, And now they're trying to take her bag from her. As soon as they took her down to the ground, she started reaching in her bag. So the other cop starts trying to take her bag from her, and she won't let it go. So now they're like dragging her around, trying to take her bag from her, and she's holding on to it. And so she's just getting dragged around by her own bag because she refuses to let it go. But they're going to act like this is them. They're just like slinging her around. But yeah, you can see she's trying to hold on to her bag. He's trying to take the bag from her. And she just won't let it go.
She's a threat to our safety.
So yeah, this is a video of police knocking over a pro-Palestinian protester named Annalise Orlek. The Jewish 65-year-old chair of Jewish studies at Dartmouth College. Apparently, we're supposed to believe she's anti-Semitic and in league with Hamas. I'll say that she should get arrested, but I'm not going to say she's in league with Hamas. Also, I mean, just on a side note, Nick Fuentes is getting unbanned, apparently, from Twitter. Again, the last time, if you guys saw my documentary on Candace Owens, we go over Nick Fuentes pretty thoroughly in that. And we talk about the fact that the last time he was unbanned, which was a year ago, he was unbanned from Twitter for 1 day. For 24 hours. And then he said some fucking shit. And he got banned again. Why is Nick getting unbanned? You know, it's Elon Musk wants to virtue signal how free he wants his speech to be, and so he's just picking the biggest pieces of shit to unban. There's tons of people who are banned still. There's tons of people who aren't getting unbanned that are like not nearly as controversial and haven't said nearly as horrible things as he has, but they're gonna unban him just because, yeah, they wanna get the virtue signal out there. So it is what it is.
Palestinian supporters arrived on,
Yeah, they're finding out.
campus,
I'll tell you that.
bringing in more materials, more PPE, and refortified their walls. Those walls, the perimeter of this encampment now being built, and law enforcement.
So yeah, I mean, all of these people are just watching Asmongold laughing as they're tearing down their fucking forts that they decided to build in the middle of a university yard. I used to make forts like this. I used to put like chairs together with like, blankets on top and put flashlights under it in my parents' living room. But my parents are also fucking fascist pieces of shit. And they also tore down my forts as well. It's fucked up, dude.
It makes me sad, dude. That's it. I don't know what else to say. All of this makes me so sad. It makes me sad because like let's say his grievance on the fucking road blockages is like, even if we were to give some credence to the road blockages, okay, which I don't, you know, it's a protest. And it's a fairly valid form of protest. Like, these guys aren't doing that. These guys weren't doing anything. So what kind of protest is valid in Asmon's eyes? Because he thinks that this is a fuck around and find out situation, but they didn't even fuck around. Like, the fuck around moment for the UCLA students was literally what? Saying that they think Israel is in the wrong.
Come on, dude. This is what I'm talking about. They keep acting like that's what they're getting in trouble for, is just saying that they're pro-Palestinian. That's it. Just be pro-Palestinian and you're going to get in trouble. You're not allowed to protest if you say you're pro-Palestinian.
Like, that's a whole ass foreign nation, man. What are we doing here?
Oh, look who it is. Look who is on the screen. Hasan, well, they were chanting death to all Jews too, weren't they, Hasan? Okay, so this is auto-modded. Here's another auto-mod. Weren't they chanting death to all Jews, Hasan? You're desperately coping, Hasan. I don't think so, Hasan. Protest is fine, but overstating isn't. Overstaying isn't. How long were they meant to stay there, Hasan? Weren't they chanting some horrible things, Hasan? Hey, Hasan, because you overuse the term, you moron. You overuse the term. What do you expect, idiot? at Hasan. At Hasan, what do you expect to happen when you overuse the term? People are going to take your labeling less seriously. They are not, ha ha ha. You diminish its meaning. You diminish the meaning of Nazi by overusing it. So when a real Nazi comes along, no one takes you seriously. I'm not an Israel defender, lol.
Probably come across like you're reflexively defending a Nazi. So now you're just tone policing and acting like you are my ally, acting like you agree with me, but you simply have a disagreement in this situation. Here you go. Well, they were chanting death to all Jews too, weren't they, Hasan? Weren't they chanting death to all Jews? You're desperately coping. I don't think so, Hasan. Protest is fine, but overstating isn't. I like that the guy who made up, hallucinated AI fucking PFP, number one. Number two, hallucinated that protesters were saying death to all Jews. No, they weren't, unless you're talking about Charlottesville, where they definitely were. And then the last part of the Hosborough account also turns and defends literal fucking Nazis being called Nazis. What an incredible moment to be alive. They're not ha ha ha. You diminish its meaning.
Wow. You defended literal Nazis being called Nazis.
It's so odd. It's so odd that an Israel defender has come into the chat to lend support to Nazis being called, to fight against Nazis being called Nazis. Weird. He got
Crazy.
you, dog. Yeah, he did. Certainly.
He got you.
Yeah. You diminish it. You diminish its meaning. Meanwhile, you over here are literally, I'm not an Israel defender, law. Bro, you just said they say death to all Jews.
Bro.
To the protesters at UCLA campus. They were never saying that. They never.
This is disgusting. Hasan just misgendering Mantis over and over, dude. What the fuck? I didn't know that we were getting a double header. I didn't know. I thought we were going to watch Hasan debate Asmongold. Instead, we're watching Hasan debate Mantis instead.
Yeah, I'm not an Israel defender. I'm just a defender of you calling an actual fucking neo-Nazi a Nazi. It's really fucked up. Really fucked up. I'm just gay.
Where, Mantis, where did they say death to all Jews? I have not seen this. Everywhere that I've seen them say that somebody said death to all Jews, it's like completely unverified by nobody. It's just random people saying that it happened, almost every time I've seen it, it's been police saying that it happened, but like hundreds of reporters are all standing around and not one of them heard it. So 07's in chat for our fallen comrade Mantis. She didn't make it very long.
Yeah, I come into your house with guns and I say, it's my house now, right? If you don't give me your house and I shoot you, well, why didn't you fucking give me your house, dummy? Didn't you just debate a 16-year-old? Brother, I was literally on TV debating full-grown adults as well, and I did not debate a 16-year-old. I'm not fucking Divorcelli. I'm not Octoberelli. I had a conversation with a chatter who had a lot of smoke, and then...
Octoberelli? Divorcerelli? Oh my goodness. That's a Stephen Bonelli reference. Calling out Destiny. Oh, snap.
And when they told me that they were from Israel, I said, okay, I would love to hear your perspective. It was an education.
Destiny debates 5-year-old girls.
Stand With Us and Standing Together are two entirely different groups. Stand With Us is an Israeli propaganda organization. Standing Together is Omdim Be'achad, which is an Israeli organization that is comprised of Israeli liberals for the most part that are very much anti-West Bank occupation, and they are at the forefront of the major protests that have been launched against the Benjamin Netanyahu government since October 7.
Let's see. Proud Jewish UCLA student Eli Sives is a modern-day civil rights warrior. He has courageously stood up to the pro-Hamas mobs and documented several instances of civil rights violations. Expect massive lawsuits based on this evidence. Damn. Massive lawsuits. Sheesh.
From entering, so I'm gonna enter right now.
You pay tuition.
You pay law preventing me from entering, so I'm gonna enter right now.
You pay tuition, right?
I do pay
This
tuition.
is our, I believe this is our campus.
Absolutely. Now, if you excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me.
Don't try to push him. I'm here to enter.
Ladies and gentlemen, they're not letting me enter public land. What they're doing is illegal.
Ladies and gentlemen, they're not letting him enter on public land.
Let's get a nice look at their faces. You can kiss your jobs goodbye. This is gonna go viral on social media. Shabbat shalom. Law preventing me from entering, so I'm gonna enter right now.
You pay tuition.
Wow, and he's Jewish.
The protesters are still out there. Let's see
Any
what
arrests?
happens.
Were there any arrests at UCLA?
Well, you know,
there were no arrests made yet. The marching they only arrived a little halfway into the court, strictly to say we are here, we're not leaving. And there was a lot of cheers for the police. Somebody started playing our national anthem, and a lot of people are hoping, a lot of pro-Israel protesters are hoping that these police will finally go inside and get rid of this encampment to make Jewish students feel safer.
Eli, you said you had some video with you. Were you able to?
Yo, look at the tears. This guy is next level, bro. This guy is next level. Did you hear his voice crack right there?
Hoping that these police will finally go inside and get rid of this encampment to make Jewish students feel safer.
Eli, you?
Damn. This dude is top notch. And they got him on there with fucking Chris Rock, dude. That's a big moment.
So make it clear. Make it clear we are peacefully protesting here.
I'm not hurting you.
Peacefully protesting.
Did you see him terrorizing them? Did you see him terrorizing them? Look at that. Look at that fucking mace on his belt. Look how much he's terrorizing them right now.
We are peacefully protesting here.
I'm not hurting you.
Peacefully protesting. None of these students are armed the way you are. Peaceful protest.
Okay. Give me a fucking break. They're not blocking anybody from going to classes. Give me a break, dude. No shot. No shot. They're not blocking anybody. Come on. What is this? You can see all the buildings behind them and everything. This is, come on.
Couple of weeks, we have witnessed pro-Hamas protesters setting up encampments all over the country. While they cower behind their masks and hide who they are, we stand tall and proudly and voice our message to the world. Israel is not going anywhere. The Jewish people are not going anywhere.
Yeah, this dude's going all out, man.
I think a lot of people just want to believe that this guy is actually just like honestly simply asking questions. You know what I mean?
Preventing me from entering, so I'm going to enter right now.
You pay tuition, right?
I do pay
This
tuition.
is our, I believe this is our campus.
Absolutely. Now, if you excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me.
Don't try to push him.
I'm here to enter. Ladies and gentlemen, they're not letting me enter public land. What they're doing is illegal. Let's get a nice look at their face.
Just reply with the call each other on stream. I'm down to call him. I don't think he will want to do it. Okay? If you want to talk about it, I'm down, but if not, no big deal. I don't want to derail your stream if you're trying to move on. Oh, yes, I would love to talk to you. Yeah, that'd be great. I'm down. Discord bubble or something. Oh, there it is. It worked.
Okay, cool. Yeah, sorry, I can't really quite see because I'm like not even at my computer right now.
It's all good.
But yeah, I didn't want to derail your stream or anything. Or like
No, not at all.
Can you guys hear this okay? That my audio levels seem to be a little bit off. They sound all right?
My stream is a sequence of endless derailments in general, so...
Yeah, I mean, like, so I see what you're saying, kind of with like the guy entering the encampment, but I think that it's kind of problematic if people just get into a university and build like an area and tell people they can't go inside that area. And also, like in the video, it's hard for me to know whether they're really stopping them from the encampment. Because, like, I mean, and you know, you can look at it from my perspective, because you look at that video and it doesn't seem.
Yeah, we know tons of people are actually at the protests who don't even go to the school. So what about them? Like, what about all of the old folks? What about the 70-year-old woman who's out there terrorizing police? And she doesn't even go to the school. What about her? We know tons of people there don't go to the school, especially after the arrests. We know that a large amount of the people who were arrested had no business being there. Or, I mean, like, obviously, they can go and protest or whatever, but they had no other business at the school outside of the protest. But then people who actually go to the school aren't allowed to move and go where they want. That's a little wild.
Seems like there's an encampment behind those people.
Yeah, they framed it in a way specifically so that it would invoke that response from people that are unfamiliar.
So you think that, like, basically they...
Hasan keeps saying this, but he's already explained it to Asmongold. He's already explained that this guy is a provocateur, that he's doing this for clicks. It doesn't change anything. For me, for Asmongold, for most people, that doesn't change the problem in this scenario. But he just keeps repeating it. Yes, no, yeah, they just frame it that way for people who don't understand. So it's okay. You're welcome. You're welcome, by the way, for letting you know, because you didn't understand. So yeah, I'm glad I was able to enlighten you. He just keeps doing this as though it changes anything. It doesn't change anything, Hasan. We already know this.
They filmed it from a direction where there aren't.
It's not that I think. I know. I was there.
Oh, no. When did you go there?
I went there 3 days ago, I think, and he was there actually even that day as well. He's been there every single day. So he's one of these broccoli-haired Zoomers that runs around and is like trying to use American foreign policy and active conflict to basically make TikTok clout for himself. He's also worked with groups like Stand With Us, which is a group that directly gets funding from the Israeli government. So, like, he has worked with the Israeli government to do propaganda already. But I'm sure this is a great career opportunity for him. That's why he's been on Fox News. There's videos of him, like, trying to debate and agitate teachers that are near the encampment. Even Sky News called him a counter-protester and an agitator. Like, he's like a known figure. This is not a random guy. That's also the reason why he is, at least for UCLA campus, he's the only video of, like, anyone even claiming that students are blocking people from going to campus. Because he's deliberately going up to the encampment in an effort to try to get into the encampment to start fights. When I was there, a bunch of Zionist counter-protesters tried to do that as well. And the students were incredibly well organized.
Just to be clear, you guys can correct me, okay? Let me know. Chat, if you're listening, get your fingers on your keyboard. Let me know. I want some yeses and nos, okay? Have you ever seen a right-wing protest where they stop lefties from going in? Actually, I can think of one. I can think of a time where they moved some lefties out. Not like this, but in more of like a threatening way. I can think of one time where some right-wingers pushed a lefty out of a protest. But like anybody else, can you guys think of any other times that some lefties have been pushed out of protests? Just one time? Yeah, I can only think of one time, because the reason I'm bringing this up is because I see lefties push right-wingers and agitators and all of these people out of their protests all the time. Like, they feel like if they're protesting there, they can just stop anybody who is antithetical to their protest out and make it so that they're not allowed to join them. But I don't really ever see right-wingers do this. And right-wingers have tons of protests, and they have their rallies, and they have all sorts of stuff. And lefties can show up and film them and come up to them with mics and ask them questions and, do all sorts of shit, which obviously isn't all that beneficial to lefties. Most of the time, this turns into a bunch of memes and people, they all end up looking like idiots. It's good fucking shit, but this is the one time I can think of a lefty getting pushed out of a right-wing protest.
Impeached. I thought that was like a big story. Not at all.
He's still in office. No, he didn't get impeached.
Why do we care so much about Hunter Biden? Shouldn't we be talking more about
Hunter Biden? Where's Hunter Biden?
Is Hunter Biden running
Hunter
for president?
Biden's laptop matters.
What about Joe
Biden's
Biden?
laptop matters.
What about Joe?
Destiny held his ground. Yeah, this is him holding his ground right here. Look at him. Look at him holding his ground.
Muscle like you.
Look at him.
Muscle like you.
Hey, look how easy it is to control Trump voters.
You're a fucking Nazi. That's why you dumb bitch ass Nazi. All right, have a good night. Let him go. 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 Go to mommy. It's milk time. It's milk time. Keep going. Maybe you should get a blowjob from your girl. Get a blowjob from your girl. Go. Bye. Bye. Let him go, guys. Let him go.
But yeah, they rarely ever like cover up cameras or, you know, surround people or try to stop them from going to their protests. This is the one time I have ever seen right-wingers try to stop lefties from going to their protests or to stop reporters from asking them questions or anything like that. Just one time. That's it. I can't think of another time this has ever happened. But yeah, just this once. So yeah, if you guys can think of other times, I'd love to hear it. But yeah, that was Bose with him. That right there, that's Bose.
And they just set up a human chain to, like, they don't even like physically apprehend or remove people. They basically just body block them as though they're you know, having a picnic.
Oh yeah, no, I saw that, and I think it was like,
As
I think
though
2
they're
nights
having
ago,
a
not
picnic.
last night, whenever all this stuff got removed, but the night before. I mean, it was pretty obvious that like the Israeli or like Zionist or anti-Palestinian ones were the aggressors, and I think that that's a bad thing. I mean, I don't think that the guy is in the wrong though for being a counter-protester or even for being an agitator. Really, it depends on how you define the word, because I mean, that's his freedom of speech, and I feel like that's what's fair, in the same way that it's fair for those other people to go and protest for Palestine.
Yeah, but the difference is,
yeah,
the difference is, first of all, bear mace or mace in general is illegal to bring to protest, and he's like flashing it. There's another video of the students.
Did he just say it's illegal to bring mace to protests? Did he just say it's illegal?
First of all,
a speech, and I feel like that's what's fair, in the same way that it's fair for those other people to go and protest for Palestine.
Yeah, but the difference is, first of all, bear mace or mace in general is illegal to bring to protest, and he's like flashing it. There's another video.
Sounds like he's saying
of the
illegal.
students. Literally, he walks up to them when they're gearing up for the cops to show up.
Yeah,
and the students say, "We are peaceful. We're peacefully protesting against the Israeli genocide here. Like, we see your bear mace. Like, please, you're making us feel unsafe." And he actually literally does not have a right to have that on him. And yet, that on that very same night, last night, he was over there dabbing it up with the cops and shit. The cops obviously don't give a shit about the pro-Palestinian encampment, especially because 2 nights prior, at this point, when the counter-protesters actually entered tried to enter the encampment, they came with weapons, they came with fireworks, they came with skunk spray, they came with bear mace.
That was like the day that, because they were chanting the "Where were you?" Was this the "Where were you" moment?
I don't know what do you mean, where were you?
Oh, yeah, I guess you were.
I mean, I don't really see anything specifically saying that. It says, no person shall carry or possess the following items or articles while attending or participating in any demonstration, rally, protest, picket line, or public assembly. I can barely read this. This is way too small. Any length of number wood or wood lath. A wood any length of metal, plastic pipe, signs, posters, banners, plaques, or notices, whether or not mounted on a length material permitted. What? Baseball or softball bats, okay. Any aerosol spray, tear gas, mace, pepper spray, or bear repellent. Okay. Yeah, and this is the Los Angeles law, section 5504 on tear gas and weapons permits. Okay, so yeah, it does look like at any sort of demonstration or protest or anything like that, you're not allowed to have them.
We were sleeping like last night whenever it happened, like a lot of the protesters were like chanting at the cops.
Oh,
and
yeah.
they were saying like, where were you? Yeah, yeah. Okay, so like we're talking about the same thing, right?
So the night prior, the reason why they were chanting "Where were you?" last night to the cops is probably because the night prior, Zionist counter protesters actually stormed the camp and beat the shit out of some of the Palestinian students, like or pro-Palestinian students, with like wood pallets.
I watched it happen. I watched it happen live. It was disgusting.
No, this screen over here is like covered with black. This screen dropped like 3-4 months ago, or maybe even longer than that, like 6 months ago. It tipped over when I had the smaller desk. It was a lot harder to fit everything on here. So the screen fell over. It cracked in the corner. It has like lines coming out of it. There's been periods where people are like, oh, you know what was on your screen. You know exactly what it was. You saw it. I can barely see fucking shit on this screen, okay? I can see like the top like part up here, and that's normally where I read things, and I keep it all up here where I can read it, and outside of that, I can't see. The far right part of the screen has a whole black line going up, so like I'm missing a whole section of my screen off to the side, and then yeah, from the middle in, it's just got like a black lines and like a big black spot in it and everything. So
disgusting. Like I was kind of disappointed that the police didn't arrest any of them.
Yeah, the police came. The police actually came.
They did.
Yeah, and they stood by for an hour and 30 minutes in single file line formation while these guys were beating the shit out of, and these guys aren't even students. Like you can see it in the video. They're like, these guys are like adults. They're older. You know what I mean? They're like older than the students.
There's also the protesters that are Palestinians that were identified as being older as well.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It's hard to
I know.
really
I'm saying, No, I'm saying that like a lot of these guys, especially the more violent ones, have already been like identified as not going to UCLA. And they're basically return customers. So. And they're basically return customers at this point. It was a big point of contention with the students too. Because UCLA was like, oh, we are going to take administrative action against the counter protesters for being violent. And the students were frustrated with that because they were like, how the fuck are you going to do anything as an administration to someone who's not a student? Because a lot of the counter protesters were not students. Like there were known right-wing figures and stuff like that amongst the counter protesters. Anyway, so the reason why the students were frustrated, understandably, is because they've demonstrated great messaging discipline so far. They are very, they're as limited in their disruption as possible. And historically speaking, campus-wide protests such as this one is infinitely more disruptive than what the pro-Palestinian encampment looked like. I mean, we're talking in 1968, they were taking fucking, literally, students would go in during the civil rights movement with guns and take deans hostage. In 1968 in Columbia, they took a dean hostage for like days.
Yeah, I know about that.
Yeah, they would literally just like shut off access for a dean from like leaving their room. They'd be like, no, you're not leaving. So historically speaking, people on the right side of history that we understand were on the right side of history have taken way more radical and way more disruptive approaches to protest. So all things considered, both in the Columbia University, where they overtook Hamilton Hall again, just like they had done time and time again at Columbia specifically. That hall has a historical significance for student protesters. And also especially at UCLA, where the encampment was like not even remotely disruptive, simply just taking on this massive lawn space where there's a lot of demonstrations usually, and building putting tents around it and trying to protect the tents from people coming in and fucking it up. There are videos of counter protesters breaking into the encampment in spite of the human wall, the human shield, the human chain that they create. And as soon as they get in, they start fucking throwing hooks, throwing bows, stealing people's fucking tents, trying to like shit on, like trying to break the tents apart and stuff. So that's the reason why they don't want to let in random people to protect the students, because they know the university won't do that. As demonstrated by the fact that they didn't do that when the counter protesters came and the cops literally stood idly by.
I do think that like whenever I watched it live, there was like crazy fucking violence. And then once the cops showed up, even whenever they were in that line, the violence went down by like 95%. But I think that you're totally right that the counter protesters were like the agitators. They 100% were, and they were being violent. And to me, it was disappointing that I think the police didn't arrest more of them, because it was pretty obvious that the pro-Palestinian ones were the ones that were the victims in that situation.
Yeah, but they ended up arresting only the Palestinian, like the pro-Palestinian side. And the night prior, they didn't actually engage with the counter-protesters until until they were setting off fireworks and launching them directly in the encampment. So,
which protest is this? I didn't. At the one that we looked at, I didn't really see counter-protesters very much, but there were a ton of people standing around the sides with phones and stuff, and I just assumed that they were protesters that were just outside of the barriers, but maybe they were counter-protesters. And I definitely didn't see any violence. If anybody has like a clip of this or knows what he's talking about, send it to me or post it in the Discord. If you haven't joined the Discord, there's a link in the description on YouTube. So if you're watching on another platform, you can go over to YouTube, youtube.com/tomfooleryshow, and go into the description, and you can link it to me in the Discord under content suggestions. But yeah.
The question is, why are they picking a side? Because they've arrested hundreds of students, both at Columbia University, both in CCNY. What's up?
You mean, why are the police picking a side?
The police are picking a side, and it's not the side that is the violent side in this situation. It's the side that's peacefully demonstrating. In my opinion, a direct violation of First Amendment rights. I don't even personally believe that protesters are supposed to, protests are going to be disruptive. Some of those protest movements you might not agree with, or the taxes you might not agree with. But ultimately, the way I look at it is they were the perfect victims in this situation, even though I don't expect them to be perfect victims. And yet, even after all of that, they were still met with violent free speech suppression from the state.
I don't know if it's really free speech suppression, right? Because they're not really getting arrested for protesting. They're getting arrested for putting a bunch of tents on the campus.
Yeah, Hasan keeps saying this. I'm blown away that he would actually say this to somebody while being confronted. This whole time I kept thinking, he's not this retarded. He's just saying this because nobody's there to actually challenge him. Nobody's there to actually call him on his shit. So he's just strawmanning the hell out of this because nobody's there. But now somebody's actually there, and he's still saying this. Dishonest? No, I'm saying he's not dishonest. I'm saying somehow he's just actually this dumb. He actually believes this. He actually thinks that they were getting arrested just for being pro-Palestinian. He actually thinks that they're getting arrested just for being protesters.
Whenever the campus tells them to leave.
Yeah,
I mean, the police
nobody ever gets arrested for protesting. That's just that's not a thing. Everybody always when states like in Russia or in China or whatever, when people are getting arrested for protesting, the state of course makes up another reason for it there as well. They'll be like, oh, trespassing, you know what I mean? Obstructing.
But do you think that's unreasonable?
Do I think that arresting someone for protesting peacefully is unreasonable? Yes.
Well, do I think that, I think a better question is that if you own a property, should you have the autonomy to decide who's on that property?
Well, in this circumstance, it's literally public property because it's UCLA. UCLA is a public school too, so that ultimately changes the dynamic a lot. It depends on what the property is, though. There's private property, like someone's house, right? I don't think that people should come to your house and protest it at your house. It's very different, disrupting your life, and violating your privacy and safety, versus protesting in the middle of a public space at the school that you pay tuition to is perfectly valid in my opinion.
Well, everybody else pays tuition too. I think it's kind of unfair if, for example, some people that pay tuition are locking other people out that are also paying tuition from the same services that they're both paying for.
So you bring up a good point, right? You're saying this person also pays tuition. He should be able to go to any space he wants to, any place he wants to on campus, which is correct.
I'm sure there's a few exceptions, but yeah, generally.
Yeah. So obviously there are many exceptions, not just a few. UCLA campus is very famous. They shut off certain parts of the campus for filming and stuff like that all the time. The difference here is that this is a broad, open public space that these students were already occupying. And the reason why they're not letting, they weren't disrupting class. They weren't stopping people from going to class. The university, as a matter of fact, is the reason why the other buildings that were in the surrounding area were shut down. I talked to the students when I was there, and they stated they wanted to go to the library, for example. It's across the green area is across the way from the library. They shut down the library during midterms so that these guys' lives would be harder, so that they would have a harder time studying. They shut down the Wi-Fi so that students that are on the encampment would not be able to use it. Trying to make make this protest as hard for them as possible, which is normal. I don't think that that's a good thing to do personally. I think it probably goes against the values that UCLA espouses, specifically ironic because like a lot of these campuses literally have like super woke terminology in their studies. Like USC literally doesn't have genocide studies. They call it resistance to genocide studies. So
Oh, boy.
for me, it's like if you're taking that extra initiative to be extra woke on the aesthetic front, you should probably not be surprised when your students learn the actual lessons that you're teaching in these classes, which is that you should resist the genocide, right? So the fact that the university turns around after teaching them about many different genocides that have happened all around the world, and then tries to do everything in their power to make it as like annoying for these students as possible is a little hypocritical in my opinion.
It is hypocritical, but it's also something that's driven by the protesters' actions. And the protesters are doing that, and the result of them doing that is the university shutting down those places. And also the university, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about this because I'm not really sure exactly. This is just what I've heard. I thought that about 2 days ago, the UCLA said that the protest was unlawful, but before then they were basically kind of like not addressing it or not calling in the police.
Yeah, they were letting it happen.
Is that right?
No. Yes. So yesterday, before the protest happened, because the first day apparently there was violence, and so on the second day they went ahead and just said, yeah, we're not allowing protests anymore, we're going to go ahead and call it off. And then everybody showed up anyways and continued to protest anyways, and they just left it alone. They just let them do it anyways. And then it was way later after, like I said, like they build a ton of camps, they build barricades, they start building fucking skyscrapers in the middle. Like they're building all sorts of stuff. And then they decided to shut it down, but not until then. So even though they had already said they're not allowed to do it, they still let them do it for a long period of time.
Oh, they actually did call the police, but they called the campus police specifically to protect the encampment. I was actually kind of surprised at the university's actions at that time because they knew that there were a lot of counter protesters that, in comparison to Columbia, for example, which had literally called the police against the encampment in Columbia University.
Yeah, I saw that.
The UCLA campus actually had sent police to line up around with their backs to the encampment. And that's not just symbolism. That actually means something, right? When you send cops, like cops.
I mean, if the university is allowing it, then really that's the end result. I mean, they're the ones that make that decision. It seems confusing to me that, based off of the logic that like they're trying to shut down the the library or the Wi-Fi, but they're also like having police come in and protect them. It seems very confusing. Like, what are their goals here? What are they trying to do?
Well, ultimately, their goal is to get the students to shut the fuck up and go away and stop bothering the administration to make these moves about divestment. I don't know if you're familiar with the goals of the student protests were, and every campus is different, but like specifically the UCLA one I can speak to.
Is to divest, yeah.
Yeah, it's to divest from UCLA. The UC system across the board is a massive endowment, and that endowment basically works like a mutual fund, and they're investing in a lot of corporations, and the students want to have financial transparency in what corporations the university endowments are going to, like what corporations they're investing in, which is perfectly valid.
Wait, I thought that they already said that I thought they already said that the university is donating to Palestinian, or to Israeli funds, and that they wanted to stop them. I thought they were saying, like, I could have sworn I heard them say over and over, like, you're using our money that we pay the school to send it to genocide people and shit like that. Like, I thought that it's not just transparency, that they're saying, like, no, you are doing this thing and we want you to stop. Am I wrong?
Perfectly reasonable demands to make. As a matter of fact, a lot of companies have done this. A lot of people have done this successfully, demanding that people divest from oil and gas companies for like environmental activism. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, it's been going on a lot. And just for the record, like, I totally support them protesting against that. Even if I agree or disagree with it, it's their right to protest against that. The only concern that I have is whenever it shuts down other students' ability to learn or get an education, or for people to use the facilities in the way that they're intended to. Yeah. Whenever you talk about the actual like intent of the protesters, I totally support them. Absolutely. or even the counter protesters, because that's freedom of speech. I think that, you know, if you don't have that, I mean, you don't have anything.
Yeah, as long as they're not, long as they're not trying to like directly agitate, disrupt, and like harm the students, because there's also a completely separate dynamic here. You hate doxing, right? Like I assume, of course.
We all do.
So, would it shock you if I were to tell you that there are active organizations that collaborate sometimes with the Israeli government, sometimes independently, that are tasked with doxing students deliberately and even putting their faces on trucks around the campus and driving those trucks around the campus with their massive fucking billboards, basically saying like this student, their name, and be like, this is an anti-Semite.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would instantly believe that. I mean, absolutely, and I'm sure that there are people on the other side to do the same thing. It's just
there aren't any official organizations in the same way that Canary Mission, in the same way that like.
Wait, does anybody have evidence of this? Trucks doxing protesters?
This doxing truck is driving around Columbia, Harvard, and Pennsylvania universities to circulate the names and faces of pro-Palestine students who have denounced Israel for its bombardment and blockade of Gaza.
Some students ran over and tried to stop it. People are not calling for deaths of the Jewish people. People are not anti-Semitic. They are asking for people's lives to be saved.
The truck was designed by Accuracy in Media, a conservative media group which stigmatized students as anti-Semitic for criticizing Israel. It has already leaked online the identities of several Arab, African American, and Muslim students.
The goal of doxing is to ruin a person's life. A person gets publicly broadcast as being, again, you know, the language being attached to you as anti-Semites, which is a horrible allegation and is based on nothing factual.
Many students say they feel intimidated and fear they will be attacked. Some of them have already seen job offers rescinded for their advocacy.
Columbia, like, where are you, right? Like, you should not be supporting that. And if you are going to stand by and allow it to.
Damn. When was this posted? 6 months ago. Okay. Wow.
The organization I'm referencing is called Canary Mission. There's a couple other official organizations as well.
Just getting
some of them
into
are American organizations. They literally directly will be like, oh, are you at a pro-Palestinian protest? You're a fucking anti-Semite. And then they plaster their faces. They literally try to stop.
Well, you got that like a week ago, right? Or 2 weeks ago?
StopAntisemitism.org called me an anti-Semite of the week.
Yeah,
but I mean, that's... What's up?
Well, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And this is kind of the problem that I have, and I think that really, to me, it's pretty obvious that, you know, being against Israel doesn't mean that you hate Jews, right?
Of course. And there are plenty of Jews who are against Israel as well, especially at those protests.
Well, there's even some that are protesting in Israel, as far as I know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I understand that, and I think that's problematic too. I don't agree with that either. It's, in my opinion, I think it's intimidation. But it's also like a misrepresentation. So yeah, I think that's bad in the same way that anybody else. I also don't think that people who are pushing back against these people, like the actual protesters that are making encampments and everything like that, I don't think that they're fascists. Like, I have people calling me a fascist, for example, which I think is really kind of overboard. And
I mean,
I think also
I think some of those guys are fascists, for the record. I do.
And I bet some of the people that are against Israel are anti-Semites. Absolutely.
Yeah, but ultimately, no. I don't disagree with you. I think there's like definitely anti-Semitism in the pro-Palestinian movement as well. But the broader, you have to look at the broadest defense of the movement, right? Like, what does the movement signify? What their overarching goals are? The reason why I have an easier time calling those who defend Israel fascist is because Zionism is predicated on the idea that Israel has to be a Jewish supremacist ethno-state that literally has a certain percentage of Jews inside of Israel. This is a demographic concern unlike any other. Here in the United States of America, if we were to say America has to be a nation that is 75%, you know, Irish, English, and German, white.
Are there actual like requirements on the percentage of people who have to be Jewish in Israel? While like I don't know that would actually change a whole lot for me one way or the other. Like, Jewish people just don't really have their own space. They don't have countries. They've been kicked out of tons of places historically and have been oppressed widely all over the place. But do they actually have like percentages on how like Jewish their state needs to be, and like how many Jews they need to have in the country? Is that a real thing?
Everyone would understandably go, that's fucking insane. That's just white supremacy. But
yeah,
Zionism is that exact same principle, is that exact same concept, but for very valid historical reasons, it has been able to shelter itself as a defensive posture, as though it is a defensive ethno-state. The valid reasons, of course, being the Holocaust.
In the context of like World War II and you know, like everything that happened. Yeah, so no, I understand that, and I mean, I'm not really a pro-Israel guy at all, honestly. I don't really give a shit about them. It's not my fight to fight. It's not my problem.
It is actually. I mean, listen,
well,
it is.
I mean, that's a good point. Yeah, no, I know
we do spend a shit ton of tax dollars to defend Israel. We gave $26 billion to Israel just this past week.
I mean, yeah, I think it's a fucking waste of money. It's absolutely a waste of money. I wouldn't want to support that, especially not whenever they're doing things and you know, like bombing these people over in Gaza and shit. Like, of course not. Yeah, why would I want to support that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Which is why I think the protest that these students are engaging in is like not only perfectly valid, but I think their methods are above and beyond. Like there are rarely ever going to be protests where like you have a hard time finding a single person that.
He didn't say white supremacist. He said Jewish supremacist. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know that they actually have any laws saying that their state has to be whatever percentage Jewish, like he keeps saying. I don't know that that's real. I've heard him say this numerous times, and I can't find anything to back this up, but yeah, does anybody know? I haven't even seen anybody like answer the question. Is this like, does anybody know? Is this real, or is he just making it up?
Doesn't say something wrong, or a single person that doesn't get ahead of themselves.
You're totally right. I mean, you can't color an entire like movement based off of like the most like
extreme examples,
extremists or like the most bad actors, right? The same as like, you know, I'm sure there are anti-Semites that are Palestinian, you know, pro-Palestinian, but that's not the majority of them.
There are also people who are trying to co-opt. Like, there's always like a bunch of charlatans on Twitter who are actually neo-Nazis, like openly, but then they'll be like, oh yeah, how about them Jews? Like they'll try to like sneak in to be like, oh yeah, we love Palestine, right? When in fact you look, you know, a couple tweets down and they're fucking
enemies, my friend. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is actually part of the reason why these student organizers are very careful with who they let into the encampment as well, because they don't want to make sure that they want to make sure that there's no one that is like in support of Palestine or seemingly in support of Palestine that's in there to say like some fuck shit. And they do a very good job with that too. If someone
Nazi shit, and that's smart for them to do.
Yeah, so that's the other reason why they don't let everyone into the encampment.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of understand that, but I think that it's also really determined based off of the university. Like, the truth is that the university should have the final say on whether the encampment like that should exist or not. And I think that really, if the university is okay with it, then of course the encampment should exist, because they're the ones that determine what the rules are there. But I think if the university doesn't want the encampment, I don't think that the students have the right to make an encampment there. I think that's unfair.
I mean, I think that ultimately, especially, like, protests will always be disruptive, obviously, but if protests are only determined by how lawful they are, you can write a law to make any protest illegal, which Americans kind of have, as a matter of fact. I don't know if it would shock you to find out if I were to tell you that in your state, in Texas, if you want to work for the Texas state, if you want to work for the city, you have to actually sign a law that says you will never engage in boycotting or demanding divestment or demanding sanctions on the state of Israel. Did you know this? That's a direct violation of First Amendment rights. A direct violation.
Well, how did that even happen?
AIPAC wrote the legislation. This was legislation that actually two Jewish prominent members of Congress were very much against, as a matter of fact. Bernie Sanders and Dianne Feinstein have openly criticized this for obvious First Amendment violation boundaries.
Yeah, I've never heard of that before.
Yeah,
like I heard there's like some anti-Semitism bill that was happening today. I haven't read about it yet, but I didn't know there was something that was going on that was already on the books, man. That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, would it shock you to find out that there's actually 35 other states, many of them red states, as a matter of fact, that claim that they care about First Amendment and no restriction on free speech. Ironic, because Texas Governor Greg Abbott actually said that in Texas college campuses, even outsiders can come to campus and demonstrate to the best of their ability. It was
like 2021, I think.
2019. He
wrote
wrote
a little later or earlier, yeah.
Yeah, he signed legislation into law, which he has personally violated himself by using the government. So free speech.
Are you talking about the recent one?
Yeah. So no matter what happens, like the idea that like every single protest has to go through like a permits process is obviously, I think, a little bit ridiculous, because like it is there, that permit process is there to like genuinely make the state restrict certain kinds of speech and only allow other kinds of speech to exist, which in my opinion is in direct violation of the First Amendment in the way that we understand it. So people make laws all the time.
People make laws all the time.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Absolutely. And I think that there's probably a middle ground with that, where it's like if people are protesting and there's a tent there, it's okay. It's probably not a really big deal. But I still do think that the university, or especially other like private businesses, should have every right to tell people not to be there, because it's also their private property. Like, I think somebody's right to protest is really important, but I think it's also important that somebody has a right to have autonomy over their own property, especially whenever if something happens to somebody there, they could get sued for it too. So, and I think that that's really kind of what the problem with like a lot of this is that I think that like you and I probably align with a lot of the different like opinions that we have in terms of like Israel or Zionism or anything like that. I just don't really think that these methods are effective. And I think that they alienate a lot more people than they bring in.
I think
like
if the student protests were not effective, they would not have actually had multiple universities at this point meet their demands, like in Northwestern and in Brown University, and now as recently as a couple hours ago, Rutgers University has met the demands of Students for Justice for Palestine, which has led to the peaceful dispersal of the encampments. But beyond that, I think that another testament to the success of these protests is the violent reaction of the state. Because in some ways, like police behaving in this way also galvanizes a lot of the.
Maybe I'm missing it, but I still haven't seen anybody answer on whether or not they have laws on the books in Israel. He's saying Zionism, by definition, having an ethno-state of Jews, means Zionism makes it majority Jewish as law of their ideology. But he literally said that they have to be 60% or 70% or something like that. He said that they have to be this percentage. So, like, obviously, they technically have an ethno-state, but by some definition. But to say that it has to be that way by law, I don't know where he's getting that from.
Protesters. As a matter of fact, like this entire conversation started originally quietly at Vanderbilt University, where a couple of fans of mine, as a matter of fact, got suspended from school for doing an encampment. Then students at Columbia University saw that and said, fuck that, that's bullshit. We should divest as well. And then their encampment began after that. And then they got suppressed by the police. And then their encampment grew. And now this is in almost every single state, with the exception of, I think, like 10. At this point, and also happening globally, as a matter of fact. So in a way, they were profoundly successful. So successful that
you know a lot more about this than I do. So I'm kind of curious. So you're talking about like how Brown University and a lot of these other universities, the students have had their demands met. And so whenever you say that,
yes, but obviously he's saying we would never do that in the U.S. We would never say like this has to be 60 or 70%, as though that's what they're doing in Israel. I feel like it was obvious that he was saying that this is what they're doing in Israel, and that we would never allow something like that to happen in the United States. But they're not doing that there either, from what I understand.
Oh, okay. Well, the ones that have, did they ever like have the police remove the encampments? Because
No.
like I think if the university is allowing it to happen, then I feel like the protest is totally justified. It's completely fine.
No, there was police presence on all the campuses as well, and the police actually said that they would be interested in violently dispersing the encampments even at Rutgers University, but the administration looked at the demands and found them to be reasonable. See, the thing is, there's two ways to always deal with conflict management.
Yes, I understand, Thakman, but he's saying that like as though it has to be that way, as though by law. I'm pretty sure he did say something about it, like it's in their law that they have to be an ethno-state. Like, so I understand again, like we could technically say that this is an ethno-state by some definition, but he's saying it has to be that way.
No matter what, you either escalate, you either use the violent arm of the state to violently apprehend students, break apart the encampments, use pepper spray, tear gas, and rubber bullets that, you know, cops literally shot some of the members of my community in the face with last night. And
I mean, to be fair, whenever I watched, because I watched the whole thing happen, I didn't really see a lot of the police officers shooting people that weren't shooting fire extinguishers at them. Like, I'm sorry, but I think if you shoot if you are spraying a fire extinguisher at a police officer, I think they have every right to shoot you with a rubber bullet. You shouldn't be doing that. It's disgusting.
Well, I don't know if it would shock you to find out, but rubber bullets are not supposed to be directed directly at protesters. It's supposed to be a less than lethal apprehension method or riot control method.
It depends.
And when they actually do shoot someone in the face, they can kill them.
To the people, like, you're not supposed
No,
to.
they're supposed to. Yeah, against fire extinguishers. What they're supposed to do is shoot it on the ground. These guys were directly aiming it at the faces of students. And also,
sure
it wasn't just students that were holding fire extinguishers. It was pretty much any.
Yeah, that it depends. Like if they're doing it for lethal reasons or like in self-defense or something like that, then it's fine. But yeah, they're not supposed to do it as like a means of just moving people. They're not supposed to shoot rubber bullets at people's faces. But yeah, knowing which one they were actually doing is probably important.
Anyone and everyone. It was it was basically a kill zone. You can kill people with rubber bullets, by the way. That's why they call it less than lethal.
Yeah, no, you definitely can, but I'm not going to tell the police officers they're wrong for defending themselves against somebody who's blowing a fire extinguisher at them. I think that's ridiculous. I think that they should have every right to defend themselves against that. Like,
do you think the students have a right to defend themselves?
They weren't being attacked.
Wait,
they weren't being shot.
No, the cops were at that point. The cops were apprehending them. They were arresting them on site.
Yeah, because they were breaking the law, and the university wanted them off the campus. Yeah, and they have every right to ask them to leave the campus. They didn't do it, and of course the cops would have to remove them. Like,
let me ask you this way: do you think do you find it to be a just and proportionate response to unarmed students? And many of them, almost all of them, were unarmed, and the ones that had, I guess, fire extinguishers is few. Do you think it's an appropriate response to violently, in full riot gear, violently apprehend and assault students because they are peacefully demonstrating, but the university now has demanded that they disperse? Like,
well, I think there's two different.
Dude, Asmongold earlier on his own stream was super loud about all the vandalism and all the shit that they were building, and it was talking about it on Twitter and everything. And now here, he hasn't really brought it up much at all. He hasn't really talked about it much at all. What is happening? What is going on?
Categories of that. So for the students that are not being violent, because a lot of the students were being violent, they were throwing things at the cops, they were spraying fire extinguishers at them. I'm sorry, but that's not a peaceful protest. If you're spraying a fire extinguisher at a police officer, you're not being peaceful. So if the police officers are violent in return, no, I actually think it's totally fine.
No, well, here's the thing. That's the reason why this is really important, right? Like the reason why, like, I'm glad I went to the encampment. I'm glad that, like, all this was filmed. It was peaceful until the police came with weapons and with riot gear and started apprehending with physical force the students.
Here we go.
If you look at the visuals from before the police officers actually came on the campus,
put up.
It was actually quite peaceful. People are dancing, people are singing, people are eating food and chilling overall. It's actually the university that, and this is what many students are saying as well, both at Columbia University, even students who might not have agreed with the overall cause of the protests, now feel that the university has left them out and compromised their safety personally by bringing outsiders, specifically cops, to come in and violently apprehend students who weren't doing anything, who weren't harming anyone, who were simply demanding in the most peaceful way they possibly can, like literally, that the university divest
Not literally, no.
from a violent state that they are
Come on,
funding and
Asmon.
facilitating.
Come on. Don't let
I
me
get
down.
that. I also totally disagree with it. I think the university should have every right to decide who is and isn't on their property. And I think in the instances that you were giving me an example of earlier, like Brown, I think that Brown didn't ask the police to come in and Brown allowed those protests to happen. And I think that's totally fine. But if the university doesn't want those people there, I think that at a certain point, they have every right
he's
to
not
have
doing it.
the police come in and remove them. And the truth is that I don't think that the police were overly violent to a lot of those people. I really don't. I think.
I mean, there's a lot of visuals of people like bleeding profusely from the head, either due to getting hit in the head. But that's violence, right? That's.
It's violence because it is like there's no other. So here's an interesting question, right? So like, what would you propose as an alternative to that? Like, how would you solve?
Oh, this is great.
Yeah,
Great question. So my solution to this would be exactly what Brown and all of these other campuses did, which is to allow the protest to continue and also meet the demands to the best of your ability and take an honest negotiation effort with the students. Because ultimately, if you believe personally that these students are in the right, and it seems like you specifically do think that these students are making just demands.
Yeah, they are.
Right.
They have every right to protest. And like, for example, like at UT here, like we had a lot of protests, and it was very disappointing for me to see a lot of people in my chat and just in the community in general that were celebrating whenever the police were coming in and removing them, because these people were not being violent. They weren't breaking the law. They were just protesting. And I completely support that.
Yeah, but until the university decides
But
that
he's
they
talking
can't,
about
is
the
what you're saying
demands,
for UCLA. So
that's my perspective.
So if the UT University of Texas Austin administration saying like we don't want these protests on campus, leading to a police response would be just then. But because you're.
Go ahead.
No, go. You go ahead.
Yeah. So I think that it really kind of depends on the situation. In general, I think the answer to that is probably yes. But I'm sure that there are probably some circumstances, especially with people that are just there and not taking up space and they're just talking and not really like obstructing anyone, not setting up encampments, and they're just there. Yeah, I would think that's really kind of fucked up for them to remove them for that reason. But in the context of what happened at UCLA, I don't think that it was fucked up because it had been going on for multiple days. And, like it doesn't, like, I mean, let's be real. Who really gives a fuck about the pavement and everything? But they are graffitiing everything and they're destroying a lot of things. Like I see windows getting knocked out. In multiple different places.
I don't think there were any windows knocked out of UCLA. You might be confusing that with Columbia. And the only windows that were knocked out.
That's what I was saying in multiple places. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so Columbia University, they broke into Hamilton Hall to take it over, which is, again, I will defend that as well. I have defended that. I think that's perfectly valid.
I mean, I don't know.
It's trespassing, right?
Yeah, well, it's not just trespassing. It's like breaking, like you're breaking the windows to trespass, right? It's one thing like, oh, we just walked in.
Material damage to facilities. Yeah, material damage to facilities is like is an injustice, is what you're saying here in this situation. Which you might have that opinion.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Yeah, it absolutely is.
So then don't you think that the university's reaction by sending thousands, using millions of dollars of taxpayer dollars, and sending in thousands of cops to break every door inside of Hamilton Hall and most of the windows outside of Hamilton Hall caused an infinite more amount of material damage than just simply meeting the students halfway at the bargaining table?
I completely agree with it. And the reason why is because it's their property to damage and they have every right to do that. And the law has to be upheld to a degree.
But doesn't that mean that like
the way that Asmon said that was really confusing. He's saying that he agrees with them arresting them, not that he agrees with what Hasan said, but yeah, it doesn't like it. You can't reward like people vandalizing school property. Like Hasan keeps saying like, oh, but it's peaceful protesting. Oh, but they were peaceful though. Like it wasn't really all that peaceful, homie. It was kind of, again, there was a lot of like vandalism happening, and they were building shit and doing dangerous stuff by building shit on the field. Like, and then when police showed up, they hadn't even arrested anybody yet from what I saw. They were just showing up and taking apart the surrounding barriers that they had put up, and all they're, like I said, they just got borders up everywhere. They're taking some of the borders down, and they start shooting fireworks at them.
The university kind of doesn't give a shit about the material harm in that circumstance, because if they cared about what happens to the
my computer is lagging so badly right now. I don't know why. I need to restart everything as soon as I get a chance. But where's... Oh, I already X out of all of it to speed the computer up.
Windows.
Well, it's not about the material harm necessarily. It's about having the autonomy of the material harm and being able to decide what you do with your own material and what you do with your own property and what you don't do with it. And I think that's extremely important. And it's worth more, and it's more important than any actual material or piece of property in itself. It's the essence that somebody has their own autonomy to decide what they do with what they own.
Because one of the things that they also did at Columbia was falsely claim that like these students were actually harming and being anti-Semitic and like scaring Jewish students, even though ironically Jewish students were overrepresented in those arrested in the first sweep. So once again, it's the university that is claiming that police action must be met, like police action must occur upon these students because they have made up a fake reason, a bullshit reason really, that these students are somehow scaring the student population and threatening them when no such evidence existed for that. Only to
Yeah, again, I mean, I've said this numerous times and I'll say it again. I don't really see a whole lot of like the anti-Semitism and shit that people keep claiming is happening. If anybody has evidence of this and you want to post it in the Discord so I can see it, I'm happy to look at it. I keep seeing claims of it happening, but every time I see claims of it happening, or I see like, Republican politicians coming out and talking about all of the anti-Semitism, or people, chanting death to Jews, or, shit like that. Every time I go look, there's nobody actually confirming that it happened. There's a ton of reporters saying like, oh, we were all there. None of us heard this. Like, it's just over and over. Nobody actually is able to confirm that people are doing anything anti-Semitic. So yeah, I'm a bit skeptical that the anti-Semitism is actually happening. But yeah, if people have evidence of this, you can post it in the Discord for me and I'm happy to pull it up.
Cause far greater harm to the student population because then they violently assaulted and arrested hundreds of students. So it's like it's a bit of a I'm cutting my nose to spite my face situation, don't you think?
But it's their face to cut, and it's their decision.
Not really, because it is the students.
It really is because it's their right, it's their business, or not business, I guess you could say. But it's their university.
No, universities are a business for sure.
Yeah, no, I think that in some cases you're probably right, and I think also like a lot of the people that were being violently arrested, I think it takes two to tango in a lot of cases, and I think a lot of these people are being violently arrested, but they're also not complying with what the police are wanting. They're actively breaking the law, and I don't think that's something like how do you like?
So you bring up a really good point.
Like, well, like how do you deal with a person that is actively resisting you and won't obey the law? Because I feel like you have to restrain them somehow, don't you?
So you actually bring up a really good point that I love this conversation. This is not a gotcha at all. Have you ever been arrested?
No, I have not.
Okay, so I have.
I've been pulled over. I've been like detained, but I've never been arrested.
Yeah, so I have. And it's not. I promise you, it's not a gotcha at all. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because resisting arrest is what is known as like a tack-on charge. Because cops oftentimes, I'm sure you've seen like body camera footage. Well, they'll be like, "Oh, stop resisting," while they literally have like their knee on the neck of a suspect already.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? That's on the ground, and it's technically a bullshit charge. And here's why: because getting handcuffed physically, like physical restriction, physical apprehension, is actually done in such a way that your body cannot contort in that way. So your body naturally reacts when your arms are behind your back and you're being placed in handcuffs. So it's actually one of those laws that is basically designed because it's the physical natural response to you being apprehended. So many times, in many instances, like it's basically there so that it gives cops just cause to say, well, we're using force because you're forcibly resisting. When in fact, many people who are being arrested in a lot of circumstances are not physically, like directly, violently trying to resist in the way that you and I would understand it, like, punching a cop or you know what I mean? Like, or like not complying. But in many circumstances, they actually are simply trying to comply.
It is true. I've told stories about getting beaten up by guards, and they like the only time that I've had anything like this happen, because I've had my hands like pulled behind my back numerous times. I've had handcuffs put on numerous times. The only time that I've had anything like what he's talking about happen is when they put my arms behind my back, they put the cuffs on, and then they pull the cuffs up from behind me so that my arms go way up, and I don't know if they dislocated my shoulder. My shoulders actually dislocate really easily, so it's not anything special if my shoulders dislocate. I've dislocated them like probably 20, 30 times in my life, so it's not like a horrible act of violence if my shoulders happen to dislocate. But yeah, that's the only time I can think of like anything remotely close to what he's talking about ever happening for me.
Imply in many body camera footage, we see that too, where they're like, I'm not resisting, and they just keep saying stop resisting. It's because your body is physically moving in that way naturally. It's designed in a way to just add on to the charges to justify after the fact, once you have decided to apprehend someone physically.
And you're saying this is what's happening whenever you get handcuffed?
Yeah, 100%. And another charge that they're using in UCLA.
Resisting though, right? Because like, I think that there are a lot of instances where somebody is resisting arrest, and it's not because of a body contortion reason. They're running away from police or trying to push them away. I mean, you can't have that. I mean, I'll grant you the handcuff thing, sure. I mean, I think that there are a lot of cases where like cops are unnecessarily violent and they escalate the situation in a way that they shouldn't. And
every single time Asmongold starts talking, Hasan immediately starts to talk. Like as soon as like a couple words come out, like Hasan will talk forever, and then Asmon will get like halfway through his first sentence, and Hasan's already like, yeah, I mean, yeah, like, yeah, but listen, he's like already trying, he's got some sort of talking point, and he's not ever directly engaging with what it is that Asmongold's saying. Asmongold's not doing a great job here, I'll admit. There's a ton of spots where I expect a little bit more from him, but Hasan is like avoiding responding to a lot of the things that he's saying, and it's getting kind of annoying.
Bad, absolutely.
I'll give you another perspective that's also even crazier than that. Are you ready for this? It's going to blow your fucking mind. In Germany, it is technically not illegal to try to escape prison. Did you know this?
No, I didn't know that.
Because under the German understanding of human law, they believe that obviously all men want freedom. So it is a perfectly natural and perfectly valid response to being apprehended and being put in prison. So technically, when you do try to escape prison in Germany, if you do actually escape prison in Germany, the only charges they will add on is if you are escaping with the state's clothes. Like if you're wearing prisoner garb, they will say
effectively stealing.
Yeah, like in America, if you obviously try to escape prison, like that's a charge in and of itself. In Germany, they don't even have that. They don't consider that to be an additional offense to add on to your record, because they consider that to be the natural predisposition of humans, that they want to be free. It's just the reason why I brought it up is because like a lot of laws are designed around the culture and whatever our material conditions are, whatever we want the criminal justice system to do. And that is precisely the reason why the application of like things such as trespassing or things such as like lawful dispersal are oftentimes simply charges that we've created so the state can suppress free speech without, saying we are doing this because we don't like what you're saying. But that doesn't change the reality that it's a bullshit charge. A tack-on charge, or a charge that they're using specifically to actually violently suppress free speech.
I don't agree with that. I don't, because like there are a lot of instances where they're trying to arrest somebody and the person is actively trying to fight them and stop them from arresting them. Like, how can you have a world where that's acceptable? Like, wouldn't that massively endanger the lives of every single police officer?
It depends on which country we're talking about, I guess. But
well, like the US, right? I mean, whatever Germany does is what they're going to do. But it's like I can't see a world where being able to resist arrest is like not going to lead to massive risks of violence against police officers.
It's the application of the law. I think that there should be probably a higher standard for things such as this, because obviously, like, as long as it's not violent as long as it's not like genuinely causing harm to others. I think that a trespass law in this situation, especially because it is public land, trespass in this circumstance is, in my opinion, not meeting the standard of violent state apprehension. If it was something else, if these students were like beating the shit randomly out of like students that are walking around, then, well, you have a specific charge for that, right?
Yeah.
I think that trespass is just a bullshit one to use in this circumstance, especially after the vice chancellor, hours prior to the sweep, actually went and sat down with the students. And in
Are you
that
talking
conversation,
about in UCLA?
yeah. And the vice chancellor made it seem as though they were doing this to protect the students. They were claiming that, they wanted police presence there to protect the students. And the students kept asking him whether there would be a sweep at all, because police presence in this circumstance would not actually mean safety for the students or security for the students, but the exact opposite. And he basically said, oh, no, there won't be a sweep, or maybe there will be a sweep, but you'll be able to leave before the sweep, giving them only one option, which is leave or get beaten up. I don't think that that's valid to do.
I think it kind of is in a lot of circumstances. And the reason why is because the alternative to that is that you are effectively holding the university hostage.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's fair.
But they're not. Wait,
well,
what do
they
you mean
kind
by
of
that?
are. Whenever they're saying we won't leave until you do what we want, and then you can't make them leave, they are effectively holding the space hostage, are they not?
I mean, the space that they're occupying is marginal. They could even hold an actual space hostage, I guess, like if they were to go inside of a building and set up barricades and whatnot. And at which point, what I care about is what their goals are, right? Because all matter of protest is inevitably going to be disruptive. This one wasn't. That's why I think it's like truly unconscionable, the reaction from the university. And that's why there's a lot of students who are very pissed off right now at UCLA who think like this was unacceptable, because these students did not go above and beyond. They didn't do other things like, actually block students from going to class. That never actually happened. Or even like block students or block faculty. As a matter of fact, faculty
you just repeated
and teachers under UAW 4811, the local UAW for the grad student union and the teachers union there, specifically were participating in the protest against the police presence, thinking that like at least if the teachers are there, the cops will be less likely to beat the shit out of the people, and that still didn't stop them. That's why you see images of like deans,
of like that lady,
yeah, you see images everywhere of like there was a lady who is the head of Jewish studies at one of the universities that literally was physically assaulted by the police. She was a Jewish woman. She's a professor.
Okay, that we already watched this. That's bullshit. She was not literally physically assaulted by the police. She physically assaulted the police, and then she resisted arrest. And she literally resisted arrest. They weren't like pulling her arms up behind her and then, and making it to where she had no choice but to resist or, anything like that. She was just resisting arrest and was reaching into her bag. She refused to let go of her purse, and they were trying to take it off of her, and she refused to let it go. We just watched this a little while ago here on stream. If you weren't here at the time, he is just completely lying. This is, I don't know how you could view what happened there in this light. I don't know how you can be this blinded to where you think that's what happened there.
She's the head of the Jewish cultural studies at the school, and cops are beating the shit out of her for saying that like Israel is doing a genocide. I don't think that any of these, I guess like the thing that annoys me the most about this stuff and the way that it's covered in mainstream media is the hypocrisy of it all. Beyond the obvious issues, beyond my own personal perspective on the matter, beyond the fact that I think it's truly unconscionable that our tax dollars are going to fund and facilitate ruthless baby slaughter overseas instead of, helping Americans, helping people
here. Yeah. No, and I agree with you on that perspective.
Beyond that fact, the idea that these guys are somehow doing this to combat anti-Semitism is truly, truly ridiculous, especially when in many instances, the people that they're beating up are Jewish students and also Jewish members of faculty, in some instances, literal Holocaust survivors that go and participate at these protests. So it's all bullshit. Like the reasoning that the media gives is bullshit. The justifications that universities give is ultimately bullshit. They just don't want this kind of protest to occur. They just don't want it at all. They want everyone to shut the fuck up and say that you love Israel unconditionally and that you should make no demands from the university whatsoever. And
well, I think that the university isn't, at liberty to be held accountable by anybody who wants to get together and hold them accountable, even if it's students. Like, I agree with you that like all of these things are bad, But just because something is bad, that doesn't necessarily greenlight any behavior you take in order.
That, okay, that's not, yeah, again, this just isn't a good point from Asmongold. Like, it doesn't, they don't have to be, like, they don't have to do it, but that doesn't mean that they can't protest and make demands either. Like, I don't know. A lot of the stuff that he's saying he's a broken record, but so is Hasan, so it doesn't matter all that much.
In order to hold somebody accountable for it. So like, wow, yeah, I think that it's absolutely fair for the students to want to, protest to make the, the university divest or, not be involved with those things. Absolutely, that's fair. But whenever you do it in a way that the university doesn't want you to, I think that, yes, they have every right to have you removed because that's the way the law works. And I think that's what I would say if it was a Walmart doing this or a Starbucks or a person at their house or anything. Because again, a person should have autonomy and the right to decide what they do with their own space. And also, it's not like the protesters are speaking for every student. There are a lot of students that probably are, like kind of neutral about the topic or might even disagree with it.
Would it shock you to find out? And I know that this is like not something that mainstream media covers at all. But for example, students hold votes, like student government body will hold votes for divestment. In Columbia, 90% of the student body voted in favor of divestment. 90% in Columbia University. So it's actually not about democracy. It's the exact opposite. It is not meeting the demands of the students or the interests of the students whatsoever. As I'm sure many students, much like yourself, would probably agree that it is kind of ridiculous that we're, participating. Our tuition dollars are going to like baby murder machine, right? For the record, historically, the reason why I brought up like 1968 and many other instances, because in 1985 specifically, Columbia University students and students across the board, across the United States of America, originally did the BDS movement and did the exact same things, if not more violent at that time, as a matter of fact, and successfully were able to get their universities to concede to the reasonable demands that they were making, which was to divest from apartheid South Africa. That's the history that these students are relying on, and they're hoping, understandably so, that these institutions that are supposed to be there to educate them will be human and will be reasonable.
I get that. Well, they're trying to get the institutions to come to the table. And my point of view is that I don't think the institutions should be made to come to the table. I think that you should have every right to try to get them to do it. But the idea that you're going to hold spaces hostage or destroy property or do really anything that violates their rights or violates their autonomy of their own property and what they have control over, that's what I disagree with.
But
I don't have a problem with people being angry about it. And also, like, anybody can, like, people don't have to go to that school. They're choosing to go to that school. And the student votes are not a university is not a democratic republic. It's not a democracy. So the student votes matter. And I think that
I think it should be. Like, if you were to ask them, they would say that they are a place for learning where they do care about their students' interests and stuff, and they wouldn't. Like, if you were to ask them, they would agree with that statement, I think.
Well, I think that it depends on whether that statement is convenient for them.
Yeah,
but the truth is
they're hypocritical for sure.
Oh, absolutely. But it's still their right to be hypocritical. And I'm not, and I think this is like kind of two different conversations, and we could be talking a bit past each other, but I think that really they should have the final say in whether they do this or not do it. But I do agree with you in essence that what they're doing is hypocritical, and I also think that it's bad. I think that they're wrong. I just think that it's important that people have the right to do what they want to do, and they can't be intimidated or bullied into doing what a mob of people tells them to do. I think that's extremely scary, and that's worse than almost anything else.
Wait, really? You would prefer that, like, because the difference between the majority, the tyranny of majority, is the tyranny of minority. So you're saying you prefer the tyranny of minority to the tyranny of majority? Well, the tyranny of majority is democracy, right?
This is
let's think about this a little bit more logically.
This is the tyranny. Like, this is ridiculous. This is a ridiculous way of putting it. We're talking about a fucking school choosing what they do with their own school. This is not. This is this is just a retarded way of putting it.
So I see what you're saying, and that's an interesting point, but I don't think it really applies here because, for example, if a lot of people are around like some sort of grocery store, and there's more people that want to get the food out of the grocery store than the people that work at the grocery store, then you would have a majority of people that you could logically say, based off of democracy, should be able to do that. But the truth is that it's not tyranny of the majority or the minority. It's tyranny of the people who have the rights and the ownership of what they have those rights and ownership to, and their autonomy to decide what they want to do with that. So it's
Yeah,
neither.
you're saying that to a communist, though.
I'm a little confused by your example because in this circumstance,
maybe I explained
in this circumstance, is like outsiders.
Yeah.
Like the example that you're using would actually be best explained with strikes, right? Because what you're the analog here is actually grocery store workers who participate and work at the grocery store, like clerks and whatnot, who are a part of, let's say, some kind of collective bargaining, some kind of union.
Yeah, something.
Decide that they are generating a shit ton of profits for the Walmart family, the Waltons, right? And they're saying, I think we want.
I know.
What's up?
Oh, I worked at Sam's Club for a week, and in orientation, they even had things on the wall saying how bad unions were.
Oh, yeah.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. I love Sam's Club. Costco's
great,
probably better. Costco's a little bit better for their workers, but you know, I was in awe of Sam's Club when I first came to America. I thought this is the greatest thing America's ever invented.
Sam's Club has better pizza, man. It's really good.
But yeah. But the thing is, in that circumstance, right, the majority of workers at Sam's Club would potentially stop, or Walmart would potentially stop people from going into Walmart, which has historically been done.
Yeah, seriously.
For
Like,
not just
I don't know
Walmart,
why
but,
we're
like, you know,
talking
it's
about
been
this
done
right
time
now.
and time again. And these examples of protest are disruptive at the time.
Wait, no, Hasan's analogy is bullshit. Students are a university. Wait, what? Students are a university would be like customers to a grocery store. The students are not staff. Right, correct. Kind of. It's a little bit different because for a school, you're not just a customer. You are like more of a student body. And so it is a little bit different, especially when there's long-term implications with what it is that you're paying for. And there can even be housing there where you're staying on campus. Like there's a lot more to it, but it's, I would say that Asmongold's analogy is definitely more apt than Hasan's is.
And possibly even very annoying for those who just want to get their fucking food and get the fuck out, and they don't want to think about it. But ultimately, movements like this have created a lot of the rules and a lot of the freedoms that we now take for granted, including things like the weekend, including the abolition of child labor, even though it's coming back to America, to many different states right now.
And Roblox.
Workplace protections, things of that nature. So the reason why I am on board with these students is not because they're like, you know, doing unimaginably peaceful protests, like much better in a much better way than I would ever be able to do it.
You're using an argument of basically the ends justify the means, right?
Yeah.
Is that? Yeah, you are. And I understand
but only because like the ultimate goal is one that I agree with and I think is just, and I think you think is just as well.
And that's what I think is scary though, right? Because once you create a foundation where that type of thinking is justified, then who's to stop people who disagree with you and want to do something bad for thinking and applying the same type of logic? And that's what I think is scary, because I think you're right.
But that already
right?
exists.
Like,
that is how most people approach matters.
Bad. It's also very bad, right? And what I'm saying is that I think there's a situation where in applications of the law, all of it is bad or none of it is bad. You can't have a thing where you kind of means test each individual person and each individual cause as to whether or not it's justifiably okay to break the law for this cause. I think that's very unfair, and I think also
that's not true though. What you're saying is actually not correct. I just want to let you know. That's precisely the reason why the prosecutor's office in Texas, in Austin specifically, refused to prosecute all of the individuals that were apprehended by the Texas state troopers at the protest. So like leniency is exactly how the criminal justice system applies the means testing, I guess. And the reason for why they did that is because these guys were lawfully protesting and exercising their First Amendment rights.
They weren't doing anything wrong. Number one, like the people here at UT were doing nothing wrong. They should have never been apprehended.
Yeah,
there's no.
But the same fate will befall the UCLA students as well. And the reason for why they will inevitably not get any serious criminal charges or any charges whatsoever is because ultimately what they are doing is peaceful demonstration. The major purpose here of sending the police there is not actually to this is what is like on principle alone anti-American, in my opinion, if we are to believe the First Amendment is real and true and enshrined and protected by the Constitution, which is probably one of my favorite things about America, considering that I came from Turkey, and a lot of the shit that I say about the American government, or even the Turkish government, as a matter of fact, would lead me in serious criminal punishment in Turkey, my nation of origin.
Yeah,
So,
I totally agree with you there.
So that's why when I see stuff like this, when I see the state acting in this way, when I see the state like designing new bills that say like criticism of Israel is inherently anti-Semitic and should be illegal.
That's the one from today.
Yeah, when I see stuff like that, I am genuinely much more fearful about the future.
It's awful. It's
much
so
more
bad.
fearful about the future than like students actually protesting against their school in the most peaceful ways possible.
To be fair, I totally agree with you there. But I think maybe the difference is that I view these, like, in this circumstance, those two examples are both on the spectrum of not good or bad things. But you're absolutely right that the Israel thing, where you can't criticize Israel or say that people are working for Israel, it's fucking ridiculous. Like, it's astonishing to me that it's even considered.
So the question, I guess, is how do we resist against that, right? And I think the reason why the founding fathers enshrined the First Amendment in the Constitution was specifically because there should be healthy dissent against the government in order to stop the government from being tyrannical, from behaving in a tyrannical way, which is precisely the reason why I think that the
again, and maybe this is something different, but from what I've looked up, everything that he's talking about that has to do with freedom of speech and not being able to criticize Israel has more to do with businesses than it has to do with like citizens. I forget what they're called. Is it it's not antitrust. No, it's not antitrust. What is it called again? I forget I forget what they call it, but you get it.
UCLA students are totally in the right, and the university, instead of taking them seriously and trying to mediate the situation in the same way that other colleges have, seeking the rabid dogs of the state that fucking take that cost LA taxpayers $2 to $8 million, $2 to $8 million a day. When, let me tell you, okay, if you get your fucking shit stolen out here, they're gonna be like, lol, okay, write a report, okay, and give it to your fucking insurance. It is it's the entitlement and the lack of interest in actually doing your job that really frustrates me about, especially Los Angeles Police Department. You and I both know two different people that have had their car stolen that the police did nothing about. Both Ludwig and Myth got their car stolen, and in both cases, the LAPD said, "Lol, sorry." But then they have the capacity to fucking send thousands of Los Angeles Sheriff Department dudes rocking like tactical gear, riot gear, to beat the shit out of like otherwise peaceful protesters that are 18 years old. These are like queer anthropology students that are sitting in a fucking protest. They're a bunch of hippies, and they're getting brutally taken down by like 45-year-old dickheads from not even from here, from like one of these like edge cities that they all live in together, and coming to brutalize them. I think this is unjustifiable. I think that is a gross misuse of funds. And as a taxpayer who pays European level taxes, if not more, I wish that, I demand more from I demand more of a return from the taxes that I pay for. And I think it's, my honest American right to do so, just like it's the right for these students to protest.
Well, I think, you're absolutely right. You can demand that as much as you want, but it doesn't mean you can go somewhere and just post up there and expect for people to just have to be okay with it. Like, no. I agree with you that the cops are probably, like, there are a lot of cases where the cops are incompetent, but like the dichotomy that you're creating between like, the police officers arresting the protesters and not getting the people who stole Myth or Ludwig's car, like, in my opinion, I think they should do both, because if you don't have law and you don't have rule of law and you can't apply the law, then everything is chaos and everybody is making up their own rules constantly.
Well, I think the police were behaving in an unlawful way by going into a otherwise peaceful encampment and beating people and apprehending them. That's what I'm saying. I think it's a violation of the First Amendment to do so.
I think that it's, well, like, you don't view it as like, for example, like if somebody went onto your property, and I understand this is a public university, so it's different, but I do believe that going onto somebody's property and refusing to leave is violent. It is fundamentally violent. Like, you're not allowing somebody to access or to use part of their property that they own.
There we go.
Yeah, but like, this being different is important though, because there's a difference between personal property, like your house or whatever, versus public property of a school that you are actually paying tuition to utilize the grounds on. Like, it's entirely different. That's why there's public spaces to begin with, so that people can protest in places like that, in parks and whatnot. So I guess the question I had for you at this point is like, 1968, Vietnam War and civil rights protests are happening. They're much more violent ultimately than this round of protests that are occurring in college campuses. Like, you at the end of the day agree with the ultimate solutions that occurred, right? Like ending the Vietnam War.
Well, that's really the thing, right? Is that so like I can see where you're going, and you can like kind of like redirect if it's not. But like basically my perspective is that I do agree with you on doing those things, but I think that if you use the argumentation of the ends justify the means, I think that can be used in a lot of ways that are extremely harmful. And I think that also they can always be used in very hypocritical ways, where the ends justify the means in things that I agree with, or you agree with, or somebody else agrees with, but not in cases where other people don't agree with it. And that's why I think that the only way to have any sort of a stable society is to have an official set of rules that everybody has to go off of. And if you start going off of that, or
yeah, this is what I was talking about earlier when I was talking about the debate I had with Vivian and Aiko and all of them, is that they were acting like cops should be able to just pick and choose what laws they push and what laws they uphold based on their own morality and based on what they feel is right or wrong in certain scenarios. And it's like, okay, in some extreme scenarios, or like, sorry, not extreme scenarios, in some like lesser scenarios, so things like speeding tickets or, like small tiffs, like small little fights and shit like that. Sure, I could imagine a lot of scenarios where I would be okay with a cop making a judgment call in tons of scenarios. But when we're talking about whether or not you should uphold the law and whether or not these are things that we would expect them to do, which is what Hasan's talking about, this is totally different. Like we're not gonna say that like, oh, well, just because we should want people to protest, or just because we we're in favor of this type of protest or anything like that. Like we can't just like expect there to be inconsistency here based on the fact that we're in favor of what it is that they're protesting for.
Like diverging from that, everything becomes chaos and everybody starts inventing their own rules. And you have situations like what's been happening. And I think it's worse for everybody. Like you said, it's millions of dollars that it costs. And I think the truth is that if you want to change things, there is a democratic process to change things. And with the university, people do have freedom.
But you did say that the democratic process is not going to work either in the case of Columbia, right?
Well, that's because it's not a democracy. But people can deal with it in a way that is democratic, which is simply choosing not to go there. So if people don't like what Columbia is doing, they can choose not to go to Columbia. So I don't really see the problem here. Why does Columbia have to, agree with these people or bow down to them if these people don't even need to be there?
So that's a great question. And the best answer perhaps comes from James Baldwin, American writer and civil rights activist, who once famously said, and I don't want to paraphrase it, so I'm going to give you the actual quote here. He said, "I love America more than any other country in the world. And exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually." This is the exact same answer that I give to people as well whenever they tell me, "Why don't you fucking leave America if you're such a goddamn hater of America?" Now, the reason why I have the financial freedom.
This is effectively the same quote as like I don't agree with what you're saying, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. So I agree with you. I think so, but I don't think all types of criticism are the same. So yeah, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, no, what I was trying to point to here with this quote is that I think that you and I both agree that dissent is healthy, right? And
yeah,
I think that
absolutely.
I think that there are, as I've explained earlier, all throughout history we have had people who believe that their cause is righteous and their cause is just, and that their means actually their ends justify their means, right? Their methods of protest, and that is I'm thankful, I guess, for people of the past for demonstrating the courage against the state apparatus that violently chooses to suppress them, so that I can live in a country I can live in a world where people have shown that courage time and time again to bring us all of the amenities and all the freedoms that we now take for granted. Whether it be
a great place to be.
Yeah, whether it be the American Revolution early on, which was a bourgeois revolution altogether, and there's still a lot of faults in America, but America shows a lot of promise, which it fails to meet on a regular basis. But ultimately, I choose to live here, right? And it is because
I love America. I think America's great. Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Well,
you're going to say probably the same thing, right? Is you're going to say because you care about it so much, that's why you're so critical and that's why you're so hostile about things that you don't believe in. Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Which is why I think which is why I think it's wrong that the state acted in the way that it did in this circumstance. And not only is it wrong, but I also think it's hypocritical that they acted this way. This doesn't mean that, like, for example, you know, in a hypothetical, like if a school shooter is fucking barricading himself into a school and holding a bunch of children hostage, that like I don't expect the state to be violent. You know what I mean? Of course, I expect this. I expect them to not do what they did at Uvalde. I expect them to do to be as militant as they are against like a blue-haired queer English major at UCLA.
Right.
Except they don't do that, but that's besides the point. That's not. There's a whole different. There's a whole different litany of problems. So I'm simply stating that in order for the state to react this way, I think there needs to be a bar.
I don't believe Hasan cares about America. He sees it as a cow to be milked for his grift. I don't think Hasan's a grifter. I don't think he's a grifter. And even a lot of the things that we've been going over here today kind of prove over and over that he's not a grifter. He's a little bit too genuinely dumb to be a grifter. Like we were talking about, we went over a lot of the stuff that he was saying before Asmongold came on to see if he was going to be consistent. We wanted to see if he was going to hold the same positions, because a lot of the stuff that he was saying was, he was just strawmanning the hell out of the arguments where he's saying like, oh, they're only arresting these people because they're pro-Palestinian, where he, like, it's obvious that they're vandalizing shit, that they're building, putting encampments up, that they're building, you know, borders around everything. And like, when we say building, we're not just saying like they're putting up, you know, little pieces of poster board or something like that. Like, no, they came in with big things of wood and built fucking barriers all the way around. And as soon as cops even started coming in, they immediately started throwing shit at them. They started spraying them. They started hitting them with firecrackers and fireworks. And it was like, yeah, this is insane to act like, one, that this is a peaceful protest, and two, that they weren't doing anything illegal. So the entire time before Asmongold comes on, he's sitting there saying over and over that this was just a peaceful protest. They didn't do anything illegal. The cops had no right to go in there and break it up. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, he's just saying this because nobody's there to challenge him. Nobody's there to argue against him. So he's able to just say some insane shit. But he knows as if somebody else was there, like, he wouldn't be able to say this stuff. But no. Asmongold gets on there and he's saying the same exact stuff to Asmongold. He is repeating the same talking points. He didn't change it up one bit. He is this delusional. And yeah, I could never call this shit a grift whatsoever. He is too genuinely dumb to call any of this a grift. I call him a grifter because I don't think he actually believes in socialism, but rather uses it to make money. I don't normally like these arguments, you know, when people say that he's like, he's not a real socialist or he's not a real communist because he makes a lot of money. I don't like this argument. Like, he can make a lot of money and be a communist. He can benefit off of the system that we have now while wanting a different system, right? Like, lots of people say like, oh, well, why don't you just give your money away or something like that? Like, that's not really what they're looking for. They're not looking for more charity. They're not looking for people to give more money as like private citizens to help out other private citizens. They want like wide, holistic, systemic changes that will change the way that everybody interacts within the country. And so them going and giving some money to charity actually doesn't help anything and doesn't seem to be according to their beliefs. And it doesn't seem to actually align with their beliefs. It's not because he makes a lot of money. It's what he does with the money, which is next to nothing, it seems. Maybe. I mean, I think it's more that I don't even care so much about the money. I want to know what is he's doing with his fame. He has a lot of fame and he has a lot of resources that he could use to really push his politics. And that's what I care about, right? If I'm looking at him and I want to know if he's a grifter. Now, does he do everything he could be doing? No. definitely not. But he does a lot. Like, he has people like AOC on. He has the fucking Houthi dude on. He's talked to politicians and gone to rallies and helped with what do you call it? I can't think. But anyways, yeah. Is he a socialist? He's a little bit more extreme than a socialist. He's a what we call a tanky, which is I think it's a Marxist-Leninist are tankies. They're a bit more authoritarian, and they want the state to control all of the, so like, especially online, when we say the word socialist, normally people online want the workers to own the means of production, right? But Hasan more so wants the state to own the means of production. So he wants a central mode government for the way that we decide on distribution for socialism, and trying to get his friends to be socialist. Wait, what? I don't. Might have been lost on that one. He doesn't talk about shit. He's shallow. He doesn't have meaningful discussions. I mean, again, I don't think he's actually smart enough. I think he actually is this dumb. That's kind of my point. Is like, I don't think grifter is the right word. I don't think, any of this shit, like the way that people criticize him, is actually correct. I think he's just actually dumb. I think he is as dumb as he comes off. And that's, I mean, and I don't want to be rude, but it's generally my belief with most socialists in general, is I think that they buy into these systems and like believe the things that they believe and are, anti-liberal and crap like that because they just lack the faculties to get them to better positions.
There needs to be a bar. There needs to be a standard, in my opinion. And that standard was certainly not met in this circumstance.
So, like,
and it's not just because the ends justify the means, but that does play a role in it, because I do think that they're like, I'm going to be intellectually honest and not act like I'm taking no stances here. I do agree with this cause. I do agree with the cause of the students. But beyond that, I think that their methods overall were of a peaceful nature. And I think that the school reacting in this way by sending in the cops to brutally arrest these kids was genuinely fucked up. Like, really fucked up.
I mean, again, I watched the arrests. I didn't see a whole lot of violence. I didn't see anything horrible happening. The little bit of violence that I saw was started by the protesters each time. Like, I think we saw 2 instances of them taking people down to the ground, and it really was people resisting arrest. And not only that, but again, the old woman just kind of walked up and assaulted the police in the first place. From what it looks like, it could be that she didn't actually do anything, but from what it looked like, from the angle that we had, it looks like she comes up and starts poking the police in the chest, and then they try to arrest her, and she's trying to pull away from them. They take her down to the ground, and then she starts reaching in her purse, so they start trying to pull her purse away from her. She refuses to let it go, and as they're pulling the purse, she hangs on to it, and they end up dragging her around because she's holding on to her purse the whole time. So it wasn't them dragging her around, it's them trying to take her purse away and her refusing to let it go. And reaching into your purse while you're getting arrested, just not a very smart move. I mean, if that fucking Jewish bitch was black, she would have had another thing coming.
Do you think that bar is?
And scary as well. What do I think that bar is? I think I think when you do actually engage in direct acts of violence, it makes your cause definitely a lot less palatable to many others.
You don't view like blocking access or trespassing as a direct act of violence.
No, I mean, definitionally, under the
this
legal
is really
code,
weird.
trespass is not.
So liberals are against
act.
the First Amendment.
Yeah, no, it's.
I've explained 100 times why this is not the First Amendment. I don't know why you would start with that instead of like, if you want to argue against me on whether or not this is actually qualifies as the First Amendment, you can do that. But yeah, to act like we're against the First Amendment when I think it's pretty clear it's not the First Amendment. It seems a little odd. This is like right wingers acting like getting kicked off Facebook is against the First Amendment. Are we talking Columbia or UCLA? I don't know what the distinction is. I've only really looked into UCLA. I don't really know much about Columbia. I haven't looked into it much, but is there a distinction? What, aren't they both private universities?
It's not.
Yeah, I don't agree that like I don't think that it should be considered that.
I think blocking access in some cases can be, however.
Yes, if you're like technically kidnapping someone, if you're like restricting their movement, then yes, you are doing that. But these students weren't doing that. The way I see it is like everyone dances around the rules, right? Like to the best of their ability, which is precisely the reason why like I guess it's like what these guys were doing is in some ways, even though their cause is just, and I agree with their methods, and I probably would defend them if they were way worse than they are currently for that reason. I'm being very honest here. In this circumstance, especially, the students setting up an encampment and not allowing like random people who are like very obviously there to agitate, with the exception of like students that are genuinely, honestly, and earnestly trying to lend their support, was for good reason, so that they don't have like random fucking Nazis showing up at their doorstep and saying a whole bunch of like fucked up things that would put a lot of the Jewish students there in direct danger as well. To be like, oh yeah, free Palestine, also fuck the Jews, that kind of thing. Not only looks bad optically, but it also is not only looks bad optically, but is also putting the Jewish students at that encampment in harm's way. So I think that I guess the comparison is kind of like if there was a family on that courtyard having a picnic, right? Just because you're a student, that would not give you the right to like step on the picnic while they're having a meal as a family.
Well, let's use the picnic analogy, right? And like, so if the picnic lasts for 6 days, do you think the university should have a right to tell the picnic people to leave?
I don't think the picnic would last for, because at that point it would be something different than a picnic.
Right? I mean, at a certain point, like I do think that they do have the right to get rid of them. Like I agree with you, right?
Well, here's what I don't think the university.
I think there's a limit.
No,
UCLA was violent. Right. Columbia was a bunch of students sitting on a lawn. I mean, again, I don't even know whether or not we weren't even talking about whether or not it was violent yet. We're just talking about whether or not it's First Amendment. Because yeah, it's like I said, these are private. These are private universities. They can decide what they do and don't want on their own campuses. And generally, historically, universities have allowed protests to take place, and that's great. But once you start building fucking camps and, barriers and all sorts of shit like that, it's a little bit different. But yeah, I don't know much about Columbia. Maybe we'll look into that one after.
Right. The difference is there have been demonstrations such as that in times past in many other college campuses. And more often than not, they just kind of wait it out and have people leave, or they're like, all right, what the fuck is going on? And UCLA could have reacted in the same exact way that other colleges have reacted, like I mentioned, and tried to find a amicable and peaceful solution instead of actually greatly escalating to violent means by utilizing the police force and greatly putting students in danger of physical violence.
Yeah, wait, wasn't Columbia the one that literally destroyed the entire inside of a building? They like broke windows, broke doors down, bashed walls, turned over tons of tables and chairs and shit like that. Wasn't that Columbia? Students just sitting on a lawn. Smashed windows, stacked furniture left after occupation of Hamilton Hall at Columbia University. Yeah, they fuck shit up.
I mean,
I'm here. Create camp staff. I'm there next.
Read the date again of the other page. I don't want to go back to that. What? Oh, 2018. That's 2018, yeah. Okay, I didn't think about that. Okay, this one's 2024. Okay. Good call. All right, I fixed the mic. But yeah, anyways, this is from the other day at Columbia. Yeah, definitely not just a bunch of people sitting around.
That's my main anger here.
I get that. I think the students put themselves in danger. They were told by the cops to leave, and they didn't do it. It's not their property. They weren't allowed to be on there. They were told to leave. They didn't leave. They are putting themselves in that position by their actions. Like, I mean, these aren't children, right? These are adults, and they're smart people that are going to this college in a lot of the circumstances. They know exactly what the ramifications of their actions are. So
That's why this protest is, that's what they're doing is brave in many different ways because of the potential for state suppression.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if what they're doing is brave. It doesn't matter if you agree with it. The point is that it is illegal, and now it is justified for the cops to go in and start arresting these people. This is not against their rights. This is not against the First Amendment. So yeah, now that you're like agreeing to this, now it's just that's it. Game over. Like there's nothing else to argue anymore. He's straight up admitting like, oh yeah, but that's why they're brave. It's like, motherfucker. They were told to leave. That's the end of it.
Okay. So I guess the question, like I said, with 1968 and whatnot, is that like, I don't think you would, like, as far as all the protests that have happened in the past, like the 1985 anti-apartheid protests, similar counters were, similar counter perspectives were brought up in the circumstance in each of these individual cases. I've also maintained that, or I have also shown, I think, with enough historical precedence that like the government doesn't simply offer people nice things because of the kindness of their hearts. People have to demand those nice things.
Well, you have to vote for them, really.
Yeah, well, that too, for sure. But sometimes it goes beyond voting because sometimes the state will refuse what you voted for democratically and will say, no, we're not going to do it. So I guess the question is always like, what is to be done? Like, what are people supposed to do? Because there is this idea, I think it was JFK who said it, that a violent retaliation to what is it? It's like, I think violent suppression of peaceful action makes violent retaliation a necessity.
Yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah. I think we're saying the same thing. Like, I know what you're talking about, and so yeah, I feel like you're definitely right, and that nonviolent action I think should be not going to that university. Don't go there. Vote for things and vote for people that will represent your interests in a way that's authentic and will enable you to change policy in a way that you think reflects what your views are. I totally agree with that, and that's what I think needs to happen much more, because I think that a lot of people in the U.S. and I hear this sentiment a lot, and I find it to be very. Well, the thing is, it's sad, but it's also kind of true. In some cases, is that people feel like voting doesn't work, and like voting does work, but it should work a lot more than it does. And I think that people are just so demoralized and they're so fixated around trying to like protest or like force UCLA to do something that they lose track of what they really, the power that people they really have is voting. We can hold people accountable. You can push for third parties. You can do that if there's enough people that believe in it. And I wish that energy and that.
I don't think it's that easy. I think the American electoral system it makes that virtually impossible for the most part.
What is the alternative?
I think the alternative is making through public pressure, by way of like causing some level of material harm in the form of strikes and labor militancy, as we have done historically in the past, is to organize on the boundaries of community, organize on the boundaries of labor, and make demands from at least one side of the political duopoly that they cannot ignore. And that is at the heart of protest movements like this. That's why I am fully in support of protest movements like this, because the reality of the matter is active lobbying efforts from corporations and the very powerful, very wealthy individuals in society have rendered American democracy useless. There are so many instances where there's like tremendous injustices that are occurring all around us that virtually every American would probably agree on, that seemingly get no solutions from our elected representatives. The system is designed as it stands currently. Yeah, but that's why I'm saying like it's not just about it can't be just about democracy, because that's the expectation, or rather, shouldn't say it can't be just about democracy. This is about more democracy, right? To make your elected representatives represent your interests rather than the interests of the wealthy few. And in order to get there, you do actually have to take it to the streets sometimes. You do actually have to show them that, like, no, you can't fucking do this. Like, this is ridiculous. And
I think it's also about controlling a message and sending a message out that people believe in. Like, you can look at somebody like Bernie Sanders, right? You were a big supporter of Bernie Sanders. I also like Bernie Sanders. Like, the amount of money that he was getting versus, you know, a lot of the people that he was going against was like nothing compared to them. But at the same time,
I mean, he got a lot of money from individual donors, especially.
I mean, compared to the bigger candidates, I mean, I don't know, like with those massive fucking super PACs.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's always going to be, billionaires are billionaires are going to have
democracy requires debate. Americans not educated.
True. True wet camera ink. Why is your camera wet?
Easier
Thank
time,
you for the $1.99 donut.
A $100 million of a super PAC than like 100 million Americans giving $1. So yeah,
$1, yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Well, that's
grassroots
what
is
I'm
always
saying,
much
right? So
harder.
I think the strength of the message is something that also is important. And I think if there's a strong enough message, people will believe in it and people will push it. I mean, you know, we're the same age, right? So like, you remember Obama, right? I mean, that was a very strong message and people believed in that and they acted on it. And I think that it'll happen again too, whenever people.
But Obama was ultimately.
Obama
ran on ending, closing Guantanamo Bay, and like ran against the Iraq War, and then was responsible for the troop surge and like the continuation of the Iraq War, right? So like, and
change his mind. I understand.
So my point is like, what do you do when your elected representatives that you voted for have told you a lie? Right?
Well, like, this is the thing, right? Because like, people use, for example, like, you use the Revolutionary War or like the Boston Tea Party or something like that as an example of like justified violent, like basically protest. And I agree with you. And so I think the question is that I think violent and like, you know, material destruction protest, like basically illegal protest, is completely justifiable if you're not able to like vent your frustrations democratically. And so I think the question is really depending on, do people have the opportunity to vent those frustrations democratically? Because like what you're saying is like,
well, do you think they have this in this particular matter in America? Because you said
there's two circumstances, right? You're talking about the schools. I think that they don't have it, and
Hey,
I think that they don't have the
Trib with the 5 gifted memberships. Let's go. Let's get some cheers in chat. Trib with a bunch more gifted memberships. Appreciate it, homie. Everybody, while we're taking this little break to thank Trib for all the gifted memberships, if you'll take a second and hit the thumbs up button. Appreciate you joining us tonight. If you want to join the Discord, there's a link in the description to join in there. We're always having a bunch of debates and conversations in there. And then also you can follow me on Twitter. Links are in the descriptions to all of my other platforms. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and Discord. All the links are in the description. And if you want to donate to the channel and support it, you can use super chats through YouTube, or you can use tips. Well, the link is in the description for tips, but I get a higher percentage of that.
No. Don't thank me. Thank PV United States.
True. When you say PV, you mean Progressive Victory, right? We got my money finally coming from Progressive Victory, then. You guys are late. You're late on my payments. But yeah, sending money through tips. I get a higher percentage of those tips, and I also get the money immediately. Whereas with YouTube, I gotta wait like a month to 2 months sometimes. So consider sending some money through tips. It still reads the TTS, still reads it through on stream. But yes, thank you, Trib, for the dono and the gifted memberships. Appreciate it, homie.
The right to have it, because it's not democratic fundamentally. Not everything needs to be democratic. And if you own something, it's like if 5 people outside your house democratically vote that, you know, your house should be, you know, everybody's house, that doesn't necessarily mean that you lose your house.
Well, I mean, if they paid for it, If they paid for my house, then I think it's a whole different conversation. If they didn't pay
It's a
for my
different
house,
conversation, but it doesn't mean that it's a democracy.
no, I'm saying that if they paid for my house, that they would have a righteous say. They would have an understandable say in like, in a circumstance where like they're living in the house and they paid for the house and they're
Yeah.
basically renting. Then yeah, no, they do have a right, in my opinion, both morally and in some instances legally in what happens in the house. That's why if your landlord refuses to fix your fucking mold, for example, you do have a right. Many people don't know this, but you literally do have a right to deny them payment even. So, I mean, it's state by
Yeah,
state.
no, it definitely has to go both ways. But what I'm saying is that you can't do everything by tyranny of the majority. And I think that also whenever you're talking about private property, people should have the right to decide what is and what isn't like private property. And I don't think that people who own private property should, be at the mercy of the majority in a lot of cases.
No, that's
And
why.
think,
I mean, well, that's why this is public property. Like university campuses, especially state universities, are public property. That's actually quite literally the reason why, for example, those Westboro Baptist Church freaks that go to like all the college campuses and like talk about how like yell at students and call them the F slur and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Like those guys oftentimes cannot be kicked out of college campuses for this specific reason, because technically it is public property that their tax dollars are paying for, which makes the situation all the more complicated and all the more egregious in terms of a violation of First Amendment rights.
Yeah, I think that it's really about the encampment in that case, right? Because the people that were there were really getting kicked out. They weren't really getting kicked out for protesting. They were getting kicked out for having an encampment there.
Well,
so
no, they were getting kicked out for protesting. They were getting kicked out
Yeah.
for protesting. They just used trespassing, even though originally they didn't have an issue with it. Here's what makes it even worse. Originally, they didn't have an issue with it, right?
Yeah.
And then the counter protesters showed up. First day, second day, third day, the counter protesters showed up in incredibly violent ways, right? And you saw that, you recognized it as well.
Yeah.
Then the
obvious.
school cynically turned around and said, well, this is now a safety issue. So what do you think, what kind of lesson do you think that teaches everyone around the country? That if you want these students to shut the fuck up, if you're if you're like a 45-year-old Zionist dude who just wants to unconditionally dick ride Israel into oblivion, go and beat the shit out of some students, and inevitably the school will turn around and use your violent actions against them to basically say, now the state has to come in and pack up these students themselves. So they first got beaten by the Zionist counter protesters, many of which have been identified and are not from the school at all. Then on top of that, the school used that instance to directly pack you up. Like they're because there's a reason. You can't just declare something unlawful. Like that's not how this works, right? Because like vice chancellors are voted on democratically oftentimes by the student body, and the administration at least like has to maintain a semblance of democracy, especially because it's a woke elite learning institution, right?
Well, I mean, like just to make one thing clear, like if these people weren't at, there was no encampment there and they were just sitting there protesting, I think that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
So
But,
you
like,
wouldn't have an
can't
issue if
just-
they were just sitting there protesting, but because they built a camp to protest continuously, that it demands violent retaliation from the force. Like it justifies violent retaliation from the state.
Yes.
I think so. Yeah, I do.
From the school.
Because like they have no right to do that. They have no right to just start building and putting up tents.
He keeps making it sound like it's from the state, like the state decided that they're not allowed to do this. But from what I understand, it wasn't the state. It was the school who decided that they shouldn't be protesting anymore and that they had gone too far. And then that's when the police moved in. It was all based on what the school wanted. The school decided that they couldn't do that. And yes, when the school says that you're not allowed to do this on our property and you're not allowed to be here and you stay there and continue doing the thing that you're not allowed to do, yes, you're trespassing now. And of course, the state can come in and remove you. Of course.
That's
Well,
insane.
I mean, they were engaging in continued protest.
And also, also keep in mind that whenever I'm talking about, you're saying engaging in violent actions, like the police told them to leave. The university said that they wanted them to leave. So like really, violence was the only thing that was left. And so it's like, does somebody have the right, again, and this is what I was saying initially, does somebody have the right to defend their property? And I think the answer is to that is absolutely.
It's not their property. It's property the students are paying for, and it's the state property too. So it's like taxpayers, but which is why
it's the property that all of the students are paying for, not just the ones that are protesting.
But like in the case of Columbia, it is private property, and yet the students. I don't know what the UCLA student votes would look like. I'm not familiar, but I'm fairly certain, given that 81% of the 18 to 35-year-old demographic in the United States of America abhor Joe Biden's handling of the Israel-Palestine situation, it's not beyond the pale to assume that like a majority of students would probably vote for divestment in UCLA campus as well. So, I mean, I don't know. They might have even held a vote. I'm unfamiliar, but ultimately, they if we're talking about the majority of students or the minority of students, like in this circumstance, like it's still the difference between tyranny of majority is I guess the opposite side of that is tyranny of minority. So it would be like capitulating to the wishes of a smaller percentage of the student base to you know. Technically beat the shit out of thousands of students that are protesting on behalf of the majority opinion.
I don't like the way he keeps phrasing this of like tyranny of the minority or tyranny of the majority. Again, we're talking about private property. We're talking about like them, yes, being able to choose what is or isn't done on their property. Because it is similar to like they were talking about before, where yeah, if you're at a restaurant or you're at a grocery store or any sort of business and they decide that they don't want you there anymore, they've decided that you've done something that requires them to throw you out, or they've just decided to throw you out, whatever, like yeah, it's obviously their right to do so.
Yeah, but it's also not a democracy. Just because they have a student government or a student body that votes on things, it doesn't mean that the administration has to listen to what the student body votes on.
So
that was never part of it.
Yeah, that's I guess that's the difference in opinion that you and I hold. I do think that they should
not a
listen to the
difference in
student body in this circumstance.
Oh
and
my
I'm glad
goodness. That is a total obfuscation. And I hate using that word, but it just is. They should listen to the student body. Okay, cool. That's not what Asmongold said. He didn't say whether or not they should. I think he thinks that they should as well, but he said they don't have to. They don't have to do what the student body says. So where he's like, oh, well, yeah, I guess we just disagree on this. Well, nothing you just said disagrees with anything that Asmongold said.
that they did in previous instances, like during the civil rights movement, when students took similar actions during the Vietnam War and in the civil rights protests, where we've seen the worst of the worst, like what actually happens when there is resistance, like in Kent State, where they literally shot and killed 4 students. They shot and killed 4 students because they did not want. They didn't want this fuck shit to continue. You know, they were like, all right, shut the fuck up. You're done. And I find that to be significantly scarier than a university, especially a state-funded university, listening to the very reasonable demands being made by their students, especially students who have followed the law almost entirely, all things considered, despite the fact that people were like attacking them relentlessly. And setting up defenses against that is also.
Hasan has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I think 19. I think he has 19 Twitter tabs open.
So perfectly just too. Like that's why they had that's why they had surrounded the encampment with like.
Well, they were getting attacked with the plywood, and so it makes sense. Yeah, definitely. And I think those are 2 separate issues, right? So like you're talking about, like I agree with you that the university should do it, but I also think that they shouldn't have to. And with Kent State being shot by those, I mean, those are police officers that shot them.
National Guard.
I think, well, okay, well, either way, right? This is the government that's doing it, right? It's not like there's not some kind of like, campus police force that's, hired privately. And so I think the problem is that whenever you're talking about something like, Columbia University or UCLA, people have the choice and the decision, the autonomy to decide whether they want to go to that school or not. And I think that the fact that they have that right to do that means, and I think that the other counterbalance to that is that it means that the people that are running the university don't always have to listen to the students. And I think that in a lot of cases, like what you're saying actually does make sense. And I think that it probably would have been better if they did divest. But
so here's the thing though, like you're saying like they could just choose to go to another school. Okay.
Yeah.
Most schools are in some way, shape, or form using their endowments to and also using their research to fund and facilitate Israel's apartheid, right? So let's say you transfer from UCLA to UC Berkeley. Okay, well they're doing that too. What are you supposed to do? Well, you set up an encampment. Okay. Well, now the school doesn't want you to set up an encampment. What are you supposed to do? Let's say you leave UC Berkeley, then you go to Stanford. Well, similar situation exists there. It exists in almost every single institution, which is precisely why
there's a lot of cases where that happens, but I don't think that they are obligated to adhere to anybody's demands. They're not obligated to do that.
no one is obligated, which is why like concessions never come without leverage, which is precisely the reason why I think like especially when students are following the letter of the law in their protests, in their protests, I'm fully unconditionally in support of it. Especially because there's no other option in this circumstance, no other option beyond, like, I guess, like I said, all forms of peaceful resistance being met with violent ends from the state would then radicalize people to probably take up violent action against the state, as JFK correctly pointed out.
There's no way to solve the problem other than that.
Yeah, and there isn't.
And I think that's something that's unique to the state, though. Like whenever you're talking about a private company, I don't think that same type of difference occurs.
Well, I mean, these aren't private companies; these are like universities, especially public institutions are.
Yeah, excuse me. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that. I'm talking about like anything that's not the government.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, in this circumstance, I think that it is perfectly reasonable for the universities to listen to the demands. But beyond that, I think that this is a good pressure point. It's a good pressure point that's like immediately in front of you. It's like a local vector for organizing. So I think it's really, really good to continue increasing public pressure and increasing demonstrations in this regard, because ultimately it doesn't seem like the American government is going to respond to the demands being made by the broadest majority of the American population in terms of our tax dollars going to Israel.
I don't know.
It's so hard to listen to this because Asmongold makes like a clear and succinct point, very, short, to the point, and then Hasan just rambles for like 2-3 minutes afterwards. And it's hard to even like, as somebody who's even just trying to review the debate, it's hard to like listen to it because there's not a whole lot you can react to when the other person is just rambling for that long and not really even arguing against the point. Like that's all I can keep doing is just pausing over and over and just saying over and over. It didn't respond again. Hit play again just a couple minutes later. Yeah, he's still not responding.
Oh, like, I mean, do you have any data on that? I'm actually kind of curious because I was actually wondering about that myself. What do you think that do you think that people are like more against Israel? Because I feel like there's like an obvious, like really big generational divide. Because I was talking to my dad about this, and like a lot of people that are like his age are like very pro-Israel, and a lot of people that are our age and younger, especially, are more pro-Palestine.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that the older you get, the more calcified your position on Israel is because like it's easier to manipulate.
World War II and
oh
also
no,
like
not even that. It's more so.
Okay.
It depends on your media diet. If your media diet is less diverse, and the older you are, the more you like remember a time when there was like 8 newspapers and fucking 3 TV channels where that message is like super easy to control. The more you heard like relentless dick riding of Israel from mainstream media, which you of course trusted. Why wouldn't you? That's the major difference between the generational divide is that like kids can literally see on TikTok and on social media like Palestinians directly advocating for their own interests. They can see people on the Israeli side directly doing atrocities and celebrating them, like the viral TikTok trends and whatnot that pop off in Israel, or IDF guys like stealing people's underwear and stuff.
It's the same with Ukraine, right? I mean, like it's one thing to hear about it, and it's another thing to literally see it happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very good thing. That's an amazing thing.
No, I agree. And so I think that's where a lot of this generational divide comes from. That's why, I mean, senators have openly stated that that is the precise reason why they are banning TikTok inevitably, is because they don't like that there is no control over it as far as like, as far as being able to like influence TikTok to make certain censorious decisions. And I think that they find that to be a big problem. But let me see if I can find you like the American, like the overall American perspective and how it's shifted over the years on Israel, Palestine. Because a lot of these polls are like all.
Of course, if we have enemies abroad who are able to sway our populace, we would want to get rid of that. He says that like that's a weird thing. Like having control is this like, authoritarian thing in this sense. Sweet Nike shirt. Thank you. more of like a, I don't know what you call it, like a sweatshirt or a track jacket or something like that. But yeah, I like this. It's probably my favorite top I got. But yeah, he says that like that's weird. Like obviously, when it comes to Russia, when it comes to China, when it comes to a ton of other countries who don't have Americans' best interest at heart, yeah, we don't want them influencing our citizens. We don't want them using all sorts of propaganda. Like I've talked about this a bunch, but if you're new here, I see a ton of new names in the chat. So we read a study or we read an article a while ago that did analysis on the types of propaganda that Russia puts out. And when they put stuff out, lots of times, like with Trump, you know, Trump will say some things, and the point of him saying things is to get people to view him in a better light. He wants to say the best thing that will get people to view him in the best light, whether it's claiming he's a victim, claiming that everybody's coming after him, that the mainstream media is lying about him, that he's innocent, that the call was perfect, you know, shit like that, right? He's always going to say things in a way that is most rhetorically advantageous for his optics so that people like him more. Whereas with Putin, with Russia, that is not the point. Actually, they don't give a fuck if you like them. They don't care at all. All they want to do is make sure that you are confused. That's it. That's all they care about. They don't care if you like them at the end of the day. They don't care if your confusion makes you more pro-Russia or anything like that. All they care about is that you don't know what's going on and that there are a bunch of different narratives out there. And the more narratives there are, the more people are going to be fighting. So when we look at 2016 in the election, the whole Russiagate thing, where people were saying that it was Trump trying to win the election through Russia. It actually didn't seem to be the case as much as it was Russia supporting Trump, but also supporting Hillary. And they would put out a ton of misinformation about both Trump and Hillary. And all they wanted to do was just confuse everybody. They just wanted to make sure that nobody really knew what was going on anymore. Which is now, I mean, I would say that Russia is largely responsible for the post-fact world that we live in now, where people don't care as much about what actually happened and care more about the team that they're on. I think that Russia did such a good job at dividing our country with the propaganda and misinformation that they put out, that they are largely responsible for the divide in America today. And obviously populism is largely responsible for that as well, but I think Russia is what kind of pushed people in those directions. So where he's complaining about these outside forces wanting to influence our country and that it's super weird that America would want to stop them from doing so, it's really not. It's not about the fact that, like, we don't want people being pro-Russia, or we don't want people being pro-China, or we don't want them getting communist propaganda out or anything like that. It's that we don't want them feeding misinformation. We don't want them lying to everybody. We don't want them acting like there's some sort of news source, some sort of authority on information, and then just putting out lies just to confuse everybody over here more and more so that they can cause more and more problems within our country and more of a divide. It's just not that ridiculous.
Also very
they're very biased, and it's very hard to get any sort of real temperature check on anything. I remember, like, whenever they got rid of Roe versus Wade, I looked up a bunch of stuff for abortion, and it was like, oh my god, how are you supposed to know what's real? It's very hard to figure out, like, real information.
Yeah, I mean, like, Harvard Harris is like a really bad poll, for example. Like, there's certain polls that
until RT was banned. RT getting banned, it didn't do a whole lot. I mean, again, when we look at analysis of how, like, Russiagate, the real Russiagate again, not the, like, the Trump was colluding with Russia sort of shit, but like the real Russiagate, RT was effective. Of course it was effective, but like it was effective in some ways. But I'm just saying that, like, getting rid of RT didn't didn't stop Russian propaganda from getting through. Nico, what problem do you have with anything I just said? You just keep saying, Tom, no, huh? No way, come on. Russia, what? Like, what is the issue that you have, Nico? What do you disagree with?
That are like really bad, where they'll add like a shit ton of qualifiers, only show the Palestinian side as not Palestinians in general, but like Hamas. And they have many different ways of like creating the type of outcome that you want to get. I'm trying to give you like the one that I remember. One of the recent polls that I remember showed that under the age of 35, 81% of Americans are upset with like disapprove of Joe Biden's mishandling of Israel Palestine. 81%.
I would not be surprised. I mean, I like based off of just like, I mean, again, it's a vibe check, right? But like my vibe check of the internet, yeah, absolutely, yeah, 100%. And I don't know, I feel like that's a huge problem.
Different polls I've seen show like overwhelming majority support from both independents and Democrats, and even a majority of support from the Republican Party in terms of a ceasefire, for example, which is a position that the Biden administration has like not budged on, and seemingly claims that they care about and want to bring about, but never really done so. So
I think they're just paying it lip service.
Absolutely. So
seems like.
So there's stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So my question, I guess, is what is to be done in that situation? Because like, I think that democratically speaking, part of the reason why we voted for Joe Biden, myself and many others in my demographic voted for Joe Biden, because we saw the horrifying ways in which like the BLM protests were dealt with by the police force. And that was a promise. It was a campaign promise that the Biden administration had made. And now these young Americans are also seeing that very same police resistance in another circumstance where there's like peaceful demonstrations happening. Sometimes it hasn't gotten to like Black Lives Matter point yet. Obviously, it's not as widely attended. And it hasn't like turned into riots, I guess, in this circumstance. But that is a direct contradiction of like what you voted for. What we all voted for.
And I don't think that you really voted for Joe Biden for that reason, because you voted.
Is Russia involved? Yes, so are many others. We do the same thing. Tom, don't be so concentrated on one thing. That one ex-Russia guy is not the remedy. It's deeper than that, and you know it. But the United States does the same thing, but again, in different ways. Like the types of interests that they have are totally different than the interests that a foreign government has. It's different. It's not the same. The harm that comes from these things are going to be much worse when a foreign government does it.
For him because he was the option that the Democratic Party gave you. Because like I think that you were Bernie Sanders, like you were about that, and then they just he got fucked.
No, for sure. But my point is that was a part of it. The part of it that was that he's not Donald Trump, and Donald Trump was the one that was like actively suppressing and saying law and order over and over again when faced with like the Black Lives Matter protests. So that was the assessment from many who voted for Joe Biden, thinking that like, well, he would be able to bring about some positive change and maybe tackle some of the issues within policing and discrimination. Now, obviously that didn't happen, but beyond that, there are many other campaign promises that were violated, including but not limited to, dealing with protesters, like talking about, journalists getting arrested and whatnot. That was another major.
Has anybody seen this already? Did they ever get back to debating at any point? Is that the end of it?
Point of consideration. There's a video of Biden talking about the George Floyd protest, saying, "We will not allow any president to quiet our voice. We won't let those who see this as an opportunity to sow chaos throw up a smokescreen to distract us from the very real and legitimate grievances at the heart of these protests." Now that he's president, however, he basically reinforced the law and order must happen narrative that Donald Trump was advocating for. So my question always is like, well, what is to be done? How do you and many other Americans get our lawfully elected representatives to actually follow through on the demands that they originally ran on the promises that they originally made?
I don't know, because I think it's a very complex question, because I'm sure some promises are made and then somebody gets into office and they realize, wait a minute, it's not that simple, it's not that easy. And I think there are probably instances, I'm not saying this is one of them, I think it's actually in fact not, but I think that there are probably instances where campaign promises are made with partial information.
They do, I think. I can't remember anything but Hasan's monologues. Yeah, that's truly, that's about all I'm gonna come away with from this, is just Hasan talking to himself the entire time.
And then whenever the person gets more information, they decide not to do it.
Well, I mean, Joe Biden's been president. Joe Biden was in elected office and was the vice president.
Years, right? Yeah. I mean, no, I'm not saying this is an example, but I think that there are instances of that. But I don't really know what is the option for that. What do you do? Because like, and like, this is the question, like, what do you think? Because I don't know.
Well,
because like, what do you do? Like a riot? Do you like go and like have a recall? I think at a certain point, it's like, I think a lot of people get tricked into voting for, you know, this person, and I don't know how to solve that, because the Democratic and the Republican parties are so big. It's like, how do you fight against that? But I think that like you just kind of have to, and I don't know like what alternative you could do that would have any sort of like real meaningful impact.
Right. Well, this is one vector of pressure, like protests, campus-wide protests in general on the streets. It's a very good and historically very successful way to
that dog's
get the government
out.
to meet your demands, even if it's halfway. So that's why I'm in support of the Palestinian pro-Palestinian encampments that are happening all around campuses all around the country.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like my perspective is that I support the idea. I support the freedom of speech. I think that at a certain point, you know, whenever you are breaking the law does have to be upheld to a certain extent. But I also think that people's ability to protest should also be upheld. I think that, you know, for example, like camping out somewhere for 6 days and not leaving even after they tell you to leave and the police tell you to leave, I think that's too much. But
well,
I also
they told them to leave because they said that it was endangering the students themselves, like in the encampment, saying that and in that circumstance, if they truly cared about that, they could have used the police to protect the encampment rather than
well, that's clearly not the real reason. Yeah.
Well, that's the point. That's what I mean. And if that's not the reason, and that's just simply the seasoning that they're adding on to the conversation, then there's one real reason why they're doing it, and that is because they just want the students to shut the fuck up and go away.
Get the fuck out of there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's a bad thing. It definitely is a bad thing, but at the same time, I also think it's a bad thing for a bunch of people to just go camp out at the university for, you know, multiple days at a time. I think that's not unreasonable. I don't think that I'm being unreasonable with this, but I also think that they're being.
I don't think it's a bad thing because there's no other options at that point for people to actually make a fuss, kind of, you know what I mean, in the most peaceful ways possible. That's precisely what the students are doing, because there's no other option there. Do you see what I'm saying? Like there's legitimately no other option, just like there was no other option in the
school. Like they don't have to.
But then there's another school. You go to another school. That school also has the same restrictions. That school also has the same issues, right? And ultimately, you arrive at like there's no school that doesn't have this problem. And beyond that, I don't think people should have to leave their schools anyway. I think that the right thing to do in this circumstance is to make demands and to see if enough people get on board with your cause. And if enough people do get on board with your cause, even if there is violent resistance from the police force, ultimately the school should capitulate to the demands that you're making. We have power in numbers, and that's ultimately how democracy does work and should work. But beyond that, laws in this circumstance, as I tried to detail earlier, are just they're used as a legal justification for the actual reason, which you and I both agree on, which is not necessarily it's not necessarily the encampments and the space that they occupy, but rather what the students are saying.
Oh yeah, I mean the campus has the right to do that though, and I think that if you don't follow the laws, then nobody has any sort of benchmark or frame of reference to how to make any decision. You just have people that are making decisions for, you know, the ends justify the means, and that is, I think, again, chaos. I understand what you're saying, and I think that's fair. I mean, and I'm sure it's frustrating, but I also think that at the same time, there should never be a situation where a bunch of people get together.
Does Hasan think there's any line protesters can cross that justify being removed? I was in his chat earlier, and I meant to ask him, and I never did, but I he answered a couple of my chats, and yeah, I meant to ask, because I said there was like a chat that I typed up and never actually hit send on it, but that was the one, was like, do you think like they can do anything and get away with it? Because you would think, like, yes, once you're building dangerous buildings and camping and destroying property and you know, littering and like all sorts of shit. Yeah, I trespassing. Like, yeah, there should be. I think we were well past whatever line you can draw on this.
And they force a group of people to do something in a way that's non-democratic, because
Yeah.
it's really like
This was at the heart of the civil rights movement, though. You know, Rosa Parks refusing to sit at the back of the bus. You know, student protests and sit-ins being enforced in the Montgomery bus boycott. Like, these are all disruptive acts of civil disobedience that were met with violent police brutality at the end of it. Like, I don't think you have.
But from what I understand, like the sit-ins, the kids like knew that they were going to get arrested. They all planned on getting arrested, and they all said to each other, yes, we are going to get arrested. Just cooperate when they get here. And they would show up and put them in cuffs and take them away. In this case, we are not talking about people who are just putting the cuffs on and walking away when the police show up. That's not what they're doing. Like, MLK would literally tell everybody, hey, we're going to go march. We're not allowed to do this. So just know they are going to arrest you. Do not resist. Just go peacefully. Like that, in this case, they were not going peacefully. They refused to go. They tried to block the police from even being able to get in. They shot fireworks at them. They threw firecrackers at them. They sprayed them with, I think it was like a fire extinguisher and shit. Like, this is not comparable.
Have this opinion. You share this opinion on the civil rights movement, I suspect, right?
Well, it's a much different situation. I mean, of course it's different. Yeah, I mean, like, one of them you're protesting against a government, and the other one you're protesting against a university. A university isn't a government.
Okay, well, state universities. Well, they did protest against universities as well during the civil rights movement. So
what I'm saying is that I think that if you're talking about the actual, if you're talking about actual laws, then yeah, people, if they want to protest, the best way to protest is to fucking vote. Like, that's what needs to happen. Like, I don't think that you can rely on just getting a bunch of people together and then hopefully the government is going to do what you want. Because also, like, just because there's a lot of people protesting doesn't always mean that means that that's what the majority of the people want. Because the majority of the people
did not want, any kind of desegregation in general.
It depends probably on where, but I think that in some cases you're probably right.
He's literally incapable of responding to the point. He's literally incapable of responding to the point. He can't do it, dude. He can't do it. He's incapable. This isn't even a new thing. This isn't a new thing. If you go watch like Destiny's debates with Hasan back in the day, he had to repeat his points to Hasan over and over and over and over, trying to get Hasan to engage. He's just incapable of doing it. He really is. Like, I don't think his brain is able to draw direct lines from one thing to another to another. He's not able to do it. It's so annoying.
March the,
especially in the South,
and stuff like that. Yeah, you're right about that.
So that was that was the minority in that circumstance, and allies of the black community demonstrating unlawfully, like they were breaking the law. They were specifically going to segregated institutions, whether it be universities or whether it be restaurants, private establishments, and demonstrating in a show of force to say that these are unlawful, these are unjust laws that are in place, and these are unjust practices that are in place that are that the government turns a blind eye to, and that needs to change. And in that instance, just like these students, like there were plenty of different mechanisms of the state that. No, it wasn't just the government. I'm saying like private institutions were the ones who are enforcing segregation on their own volition. The reason why we have specific rights that actually interfere in the way that private businesses conduct their affairs on the boundaries of exclusion for certain races and even gender discrimination is specifically because, and this was the segregationist argument at the time, which was just let the businesses do whatever they want. I'm sure that people will take their dollars elsewhere, but it didn't work that way. Plenty of people actually genuinely loved the idea that there were white-only institutions. White people had more capital than black people, especially in the South, and therefore all of these businesses, if it wasn't for the federal government, inevitably due to a tremendous amount of protest and a tremendous amount of resistance and a lot of state violence that tried to squash this democratic resistance. If it wasn't for all of that, then we would still not have any laws that interfere in the affairs of private businesses and refuse them to refuse to allow them to discriminate.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying, definitely. I think if you're talking about the protests that are happening now, I do think that is different than the civil rights movement. It's certainly different. And whenever you're talking about the civil rights movement also, like, I don't know.
My most recent YouTube short, and I know we just did this maybe 2 weeks ago, but it is happening again. My most recent YouTube short that I posted 2 days ago just became my most viewed YouTube short ever. It's this says 8.7 thousand. It's actually at 10.7 thousand right now. 10.7 thousand views. Which the most viewed one before this was the one from just a couple weeks ago that got to 9.8 thousand, but yeah, this one right here, which I can't play it because it does have copyrighted music on it. But yeah, it's at 10.7 thousand views.
Know if we can really apply something that happened 60 years ago to something that's happening right now, or 50.
Which actually the video that it's from is doing fairly well as well, last I checked.
Years ago. It's very hard for me to say. I think in some cases you're probably right. In some cases, maybe not so much.
What do you mean by it's different?
It's different because the entire culture is different. The way that people are making decisions is different. The way that people can vote is different. There are all of these ways that are different.
I mean, so yeah, black people were not, they couldn't really vote. I mean, I guess it's not that different now because there's many different ways of legally restricting black people from voting. But that's more complex. But ultimately, the methods
that is not his
were
point.
unlawful.
That is not what he was saying.
The point I was trying to arrive at here is that the methods were unlawful. They were seen as unlawful. They were seen as they were met with a lot of police resistance, and ultimately that police resistance led to a shit ton of violence. And people were talking about the chaos in the exact same terms and in the exact same boundaries as they do right now with respect to the pro-Palestinian encampments.
My favorite short to disavow is the one where you take the entire video to add the necessary context for the scenario to not be yikesy. What? Or wait till the end of the video to add context. Oh, you're talking about the one. Okay. I think I took that one down. Pretty sure I took that one down.
But ultimately, these students are following on the footsteps of those who fought bravely for civil rights and fought bravely against the Vietnam War. In some instances, occupying the exact same spaces.
Oh, I mean, like, and I understand that. I have no problem with them doing that, but I do have a problem doing it whenever it's destroying property and taking away other people's education.
But they said that about the civil rights movement as well, is what I mean. Like, ultimately, I think I'm glad that they had the ends justify the means.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the one where I start off and I was like, yeah, so I was dating a girl. She was 16 and I'm like telling a story and blah, blah, blah. And then like I get to the end and I'm like, yeah, but then we both graduated from high school and went to different colleges. And so we broke up anyways. And yeah. Yeah, it was, I liked, I didn't take it down because it was yikesy. I think I took it down just because it just didn't, it didn't hit correctly. It didn't, yeah, it didn't hit very well. Though it seemed like most of the people didn't get the joke, and I didn't. Yeah, I don't think my delivery wasn't good. That's what it is. I didn't have good delivery in it. And I'll probably redo it sometime, but wasn't it about cashing in the past? Yeah, I had two different things. Yeah, where like the beginning is like, yeah, I was dating a 16-year-old and blah blah blah, and then something about like saying the N-word, and but I had the N-word pass, and yeah.
Attitude during the civil rights movement. And I'm glad that they had an ends justify the means attitude during the Vietnam War protests, or during the boycott, divestment, and sanctions protests
I think those
against.
conflicts are way more complex than that.
Well,
I don't think
BDS is identical. It's the same exact. It's literally like almost definitionally identical. It's a boycott, divestment, and sanctions on apartheid South Africa in 1985. This was also another student-led movement as well, and the methods were identical too. The only difference is South Africa did not have the benefit of having another South Africa that they could learn the mistakes from and make sure that they don't repeat it. Israel had South Africa to look to.
How did they even get to comparing the college protests to the civil rights movement? Hasan, obviously. So he keeps saying, he said this a million times now, is that the people who are against the protest here at the current protests at the universities, that those same people would have been the people who were against the sit-ins during the civil rights movement, that those are the same people who would have been against all of the Martin Luther King protests, and that, like, he's saying, like, you know, if you ever wonder which one of those people you would have been, you know now, because you're against these protests. Like, it is different, homie. Like, these are not the same things.
Too, so they could like set up a lobbying effort, and ensure that the state bends to their will as to the best of their ability, and the media apparatus as well.
Yeah, I mean, definitely Israel is much more influential than that. I mean, I can see where you're coming from. I think that that type of mindset is very scary to me, because while you're right that it does create a lot of positive outcomes, it also creates a lot of negative outcomes as well.
Do you have examples of the negative outcomes? Like as far as a democratically organized revolutionary movement?
What do you mean by that?
Like,
the negative well, I'm just saying
is there an example that you can give me throughout history where people organized on certain boundaries that were like democratically organized on certain boundaries, and they like enforced the tyranny of majority, and like something awful happened as a consequence of that?
I'm sure I could think of some. I mean, absolutely. And I think it happens all the time on a very basic level. Like, for example, like during the BLM riots, people were obviously burning down buildings and doing things like that. That's something I don't really support, and I don't think that that's beneficial, and I'm never going to support that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not helping anybody. It's not doing anything for anyone. It's purely destructive, and I don't think that people have the right to do that. I think that, yeah, you should have the right to protest, but if you use the justification for the ends justify the means, then I think that anybody...
He reaches for the emotional and poignant moments of the past to legitimize this encampment. Yeah, and I don't even think he knows like how disanalogous the things he's saying are. I think that somebody else who's probably smarter and more equipped to have these sorts of arguments probably made a similar point, but towards something where it actually made sense. They probably made that point in a scenario where it was actually relevant to the conversation, but he heard the point and was like, oh, I got to use that. And now he just keeps repeating it because he thought, you know, it sounded good when he heard it, but he's not able to actually like deliver it in a way where it's actually relevant to the conversation.
But he can use that justification, and that justification can be used for malicious reasons. And there's the only way to have a world that's fair is to have some sort of generally accepted rules, and that's what we have for laws. And I see where you're coming from with the civil rights movement, but you have to see the perspective that I have too, that if you allow people to just, you know, justify themselves by thinking, well, our cause is righteous, so it's okay for us to do it, it would immediately cause huge amounts of chaos.
Yeah, because no, I understand. This is exactly the same arguments launched against the civil rights movement as well. MLK spoke on this with great frequency, where in the eyes of those who are being wronged, or in their experiences, not even in their own perspective, their regular existence is chaotic, right? And And this is from letter from Birmingham jail, where he talks specifically about the white moderate, where he talks about the white moderate who places a timeline on another man's emancipation and another man's justice, that says your methods and your means of protest are actually not right, or now is not the time. Where he very specifically talks about people who were naysayers to the civil rights movement, who said like, oh no, now is not the time, or things are actually much better than they would be if black people were still enslaved, and there's too much property damage happening. The point is, from their perspective at that time, for black people, especially living in the segregated South, or even redlined in the North, America was consistently chaotic, and it still is for many people of color, especially living in.
Mind, like you're talking about Martin Luther King, he also explicitly was against blocking transportation, and so there were lines even that he had.
Wait, Martin Luther King also participated in the Montgomery bus boycott.
Let me see if I can.
Right.
I don't know if I can link this.
He led the Montgomery bus boycott for 382 days, which officially ended on December 20th, 1956. That's like.
I sent you a link in the chat.
In the Discord chat?
Yeah.
What is this? Farmer King and Lewis, along with millions of Americans, struggle to figure out what would amount to legitimate, appropriate forms of nonviolent protest. Tactics dramatic enough to make their impact, but not so disruptive as to alienate supporters. Okay. Everyone could agree on the nobility, even the genius of the original sit-ins, conducted with such dignity that their moral power was overwhelming. What is this? At an early press conference, an organizer with King's Southern Christian Leadership Conference declared, "We will tie up public transportation by laying our bodies prostrate on the runways of airports across railroad tracks." This degree of disorder was too much even for King, who walked back the staffer's comments. Over the summer, as the Kennedy administration reversed course to support the march, Rustin realized that attracting hundreds of thousands of marchers he desired meant abandoning the controversial tactics that would alienate the mainstream. In the end, as comedian activist Dick Gregory said, the march went off like a Sunday church picnic. Ultimately, these protests at the time were still declared disruptive, though. You understand that, right? Like every single instance, including the Montgomery bus boycott, was declared to be disruptive. And at the time, and was violently suppressed by the state. Like none of these protests, not a single one of these protests actually was met with hugs and kisses, and the state being like, you know what, you guys are making a sound argument. And at the time, the coverage.
I think that whenever you justify, like you can't just do anything that you want whenever you've decided that you have the moral authority to do that. Like it's very easy to go and look at the civil rights movement and say, well, they did this to an extent.
We've covered this point like 10 times now. We've covered this point like 10 times, is that the cops can't just be inconsistent just because they believe in a movement or they believe in some sort of moral principle. We've been over this so many freaking times. It's not a hard thing to understand, but it's hard for Hasan to understand it. So it's like, and listen, okay, listen. Asmongold's going to make this point again. He's going to explain that the cops have to be consistent. They have to have some sort of consistency here. And Hasan is not going to respond. He's not going to respond. He's not going to say anything that actually contradicts what it is that Asmongold's saying.
It's okay for us to do it. But if you apply this to real life, I don't think that it really works. Like, just because you're morally aggrieved about something, it doesn't give you the right to destroy other people's property, to stay on their property, or to do things that hurt other people.
Well, the property is not their property. We established that. Like, this is, they participated in sit-ins in colleges.
Here he goes. He's not responding to whether or not the cops have to be consistent. He's not responding to whether or not cops can just pick and choose what it is that they're allowed to arrest people for, or what it is that is or isn't against the law. He's not responding to this at all. He is just, again, responding to a side point that, in Asmon, like, for the most part, has been pretty good at making his points short and concise. But this time, because he added on that little bit to the end, now he gave Hasan another, like, thing to latch onto that is not the point that he's making.
In the civil rights movement as well, they were doing exactly the same stuff that these students are doing, if not much more militant. There's also another side to the civil rights movement that often doesn't get discussed in mainstream media or in our schools in general, that also played a significant.
And he makes the point about the property, and just whoop, let's go right back to the fucking civil rights shit. Let me say it in another way, that if we go back to the Jim Crow era, you would have been one of the people in favor of Jim Crow. Let me explain that one more time.
Role, according to MLK as well, which was the more militant action engaged, the more militant action where black people would demonstrate with weapons or directly get into active confrontation with the police and like shootouts and whatnot. Now that did play a role in increasing pressure points for the state to look at the more reasonable parties, the peaceful demonstrations, and concede to the demands being made by all of the parties. So all of this played an active
There are studies that actually say that this is true. I don't know how legitimate those are, but there have been a couple of studies that say that having a more militant and more extremist, more radical group that is protesting at the same time as the more peaceful and reasonable group, that it does actually help the more peaceful and reasonable group. Whether or not this is true, I have no idea. I remember reading these things and then seeing a bunch of contradicting points that said, actually, this isn't accurate, this isn't really accurate, blah, blah, blah. And it's really hard to say one way or the other what actually pushed legislation in these during those times. I don't think there's a simple answer to this whatsoever, but there are things that actually say this, so he's not just pulling this one out of his ass.
Role. You can't have one without the other is what I mean. But even in this circumstance, we're looking at only one aspect, the civil disobedience of the civil rights movement.
Right. You're right whenever you say you can't have one without the other, but I don't think that being an inevitability justifies the other. So
but they haven't even reached that point is what I'm saying. We're currently in the beginning stages. We're currently in the stage where we're getting upset and using ruthless police tactics to stop peaceful demonstrations from occurring. Like these demonstrations have not even met like the civil disobedience metrics of the civil rights movement even.
Yeah, I think that really, I mean, I'll go back to what I said initially. I don't think that a group of students should be able to go into the university and just start camping out there.
But ultimately, the point is like there's nothing that they can do, right? Like, as I asked, like, what can they do then? And you said that they should just go to a different university. Well, what happens when that university also has endowments?
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, the world is not obligated to appeal to you. The world, like, if other people don't want to do what you want, then it's not like everybody has to find a way that it's okay for you to do that. Like, if other people don't want to agree with you, it's not your right to force them to agree with you. That's crazy.
Yeah, this isn't about forcing other people to agree with you. That's more so about getting the state to follow through on what the majority opinion is in many instances, or in some instances not the majority opinion, but it's like the morally righteous thing to do, like in the civil rights movement. I would say, despite the fact that it was not the majority opinion, I think you and I both agree that the civil rights movement was objectively a good thing, and the methods were infinitely more disruptive at the time than what the pro-Palestinian side has done so far in terms of college campuses and everywhere around.
That is guaranteed. You're totally right about that. Obviously, it's not as bad as civil rights. It's not even remotely as close. I also don't think it's as extreme. Like, obviously, civil rights was something that was happening in America to Americans at that exact moment. What's happening over at Israel is much more disconnected from us. I don't really ever see that.
The disconnection does stem. You're right. One is a domestic issue. One is foreign policy. The disconnection stems from the fact that most people don't really truly understand that, like, as Eisenhower once famously said, every dollar being spent on a rocket is a dollar that could be spent on building American roads, building American bricks.
No, I agree with you. Like, I completely agree with you on that. But I think that the way that you stop that is by voting for people that also agree with you and that are going to push those policies through. I don't think that it's reliable.
It's a overly simplistic way of looking at it. When we talk about like the military industrial complex, there is like a self-feeding loop where lots of times they don't even need to put money into rockets, and they don't need to put money into jets and shit like that. Like, they have enough, they're good. They don't need more helicopters, but they do so anyways because they kind of need to keep a lot of those businesses like Lockheed Martin and other big companies, they need to keep them open. And if all of a sudden they're just like, hey, we're good, we don't need any more, actually, we're fine, we're full, and just don't send them billions of dollars, then they'll probably go out of business. Like they're completely fucked if they don't get these government contracts. So they kind of have a responsibility to keep feeding a lot of these businesses, even when they don't need that money. But it's also not just this dichotomy. Like you need, you send money to Lockheed Martin that could have gone to your own country. That's not actually that simple. Like we have fuck, I just saw something that totally distracted me. Yeah, but it's not that simple, because we are putting money into infrastructure. We are putting money into fixing roads and shit like that. It's lots of times, like lots of people, you have like Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens and all of these populists complaining about sending money overseas and saying, oh, well, we could make it to where like these people aren't homeless or shit like that. It's like, it's actually not that simple. Like there's already tons of programs in place for that to happen. There's already programs in place to like fix potholes, and most of that's going to be more so local governments that need to use their money and use their funding to do that shit. But like now we're talking about federal governments not spending money on rockets to fix a fucking pothole. It's not, yeah, it's just not that simple. Like getting people off the streets or filling potholes or putting food in people's mouths. It's not this one-to-one where like you're sending money there when you could have put it here, because generally the money is already here. We already have it here. It's already there. We already have the programs. We already have the budget. We already have the, the welfare and all of the homeless shelters and all of this other shit. It's already here. We already have it. If those people want to use it, it's there for them to use. So yeah, it's not as simple as people make it out to be. If there's homeless people, lots of times it's because they're choosing, in some sense, to be homeless. Like they could go to a homeless shelter, but the homeless shelter is going to drug test them, and they don't want to be drug tested, so they're not going to go because they want to keep doing drugs. That's fine. That's a choice you can make, but just understand that when you see homeless people, it's not because we don't have any money. It's not because the government chose not to put any money into these programs. It's a lot of times it's just because they choose not to use the programs that we currently have. Tom, please, what no control? Is there a point that you would like to make, or is it just, so you're saying they chose to be homeless? Yes, I said in some sense they are choosing to be homeless. So as I said, like if their option is go to a homeless shelter but have to stop doing drugs, or don't go to the homeless shelter and keep doing drugs, yeah, lots of times they're going to choose to keep doing drugs. Yeah. For sure. Millions of people are choosing to be homeless. Again, in some sense, yes. Either they are not wanting to get drug tested, or lots of times they don't know about the programs that are available to them, or they've like already exhausted their resources by like going in and there's like given job coaches and they're supposed to get X amount of interviews a week, and then they don't do the interviews, they don't show up, they don't follow the rules, they don't do the things that they're supposed to do, or they have like violent convictions to where they're not able to use this homeless shelter, and so they have to go to like another specific one, but they don't want to go to that one because that one's kind of far away from their other resources. There's tons of reasons for why people don't use the options that are available to them, but in the end, it is them choosing not to use those options by far the majority of the time. Not 100% of the time. Yeah, some people who probably are just completely fucked, but homeless are overwhelmingly drug addicted, or are overwhelmingly drug addicted, or have severe mental issues. It's like starving in the USA. You have to be totally retarded to not get free food. Right. Exactly. And that's kind of what I'm saying, is that there's so many resources available to people. There are so many options. And the people who are still homeless and still hungry are the people who are just, yeah, for the most part, choosing not to use the options that are available to them. You know what would happen if millions of people all applied for food stamps, welfare, Section 8, etc.? It would destroy our economy. I don't know how that applies to anything that we're talking about. Do you think that homeless people are choosing not to use welfare or food stamps because they're afraid to destroy our economy? Do you think that that's the reason? Do you think that's what's happening? Is that they're really afraid to hurt the U.S. economy by applying for food stamps? So they're like, you know what? I got to take one for the team. I got to stay homeless this time, guys. It's really gonna, we're gonna cause another 2008 recession if I go get food stamps. I'm saying what would happen if they did. That's fine. That's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about the fact that there are resources available to these people, and that if, in large part, tons of people were getting on food stamps, then yeah, we would start to adjust our budgets and adjust like where the money is being allocated. But currently, people are complaining about money going to rockets as though we just don't, we ran out of money in welfare. We got to put more money there. And there's people who are homeless. We need to just go hand them millions of dollars so that they can go buy a house. Like, that's not how any of this works. That's not how any of it works. We're not going to just buy houses for homeless people. We're going to put them through programs. And just to be clear, I know tons of people are going to say, well, why not? Why wouldn't we buy them home? Because it's been proven time and time again that it actually is not helpful. It is not helpful. It is not beneficial to just buy houses for people. It is not helpful to just buy them things, because they actually need to go through the processes to get it themselves, and then they are capable of existing within society like a normal person. But if you just give them things, it is not helpful. They do not end up successful afterwards. America is not choosing food over rockets. I don't know why you're saying that. My entire point is that they're not choosing rockets over food. My entire point is that it's not even a choice right now. They don't even have a choice. There is not a dichotomy between rockets and food. That's the whole point of everything that I'm saying. The entire point is there is no choice.
Enough, and I don't think it's effective enough to try to do what they're doing and hope that, because like, and I can only speak for like myself and what I've seen. I feel like the way that a lot of those people, the protesters, have conducted themselves and what they're doing, I think a lot of people don't like it. And I feel like it's alienated a lot of different people, and I don't think it's helped at all.
I think that the mainstream media definitely massages.
Is that really the number? Let me. Around 1 in every 500 Americans was experiencing homelessness in January of 2023. The Department of Housing and Urban Development counted 653,000 homeless Americans in its annual point in time report, which measures homelessness across the U.S. on a single night each winter. Okay, so yeah, not millions, about 600,000. Not millions. About 600,000, give or take. So I don't think this would destroy the American economy if everybody that wanted to got food stamps. Again, if everybody who wanted to got food stamps. Because again, we are all well aware that probably the majority of homeless people do not want to be put on these programs because they do not want to be drug tested. So we are already well aware that the majority of those people do not want these programs.
The narrative in a certain direction. A lot of people probably see them and only hear about how anti-Semitic they are, even though that's not the case.
Well,
So that
here's
definitely
also
plays a role.
is like my community, like obviously that's the viewpoint that I have, right? But like I'm sure your community probably disagrees with me on this, and like you know,
Yes.
you guys, yeah, I bet. And so like yeah, you guys probably have like the opposite, like probably like 90-10 or like 80-20 that I do. And so it's very hard for me really to say for sure. But I do think that by doing that, or like by the protests, like I don't really know if it's really helped the cause hardly at all. And
Well,
I think
it seems like polling is still pretty consistent and consistently favoring the Palestinian side on this matter.
at least for the that's what you said, yeah.
Yeah, so the student-led protests have not, as far as I've seen, have not actually changed.
Being an addict is hard and awful, but still a choice in many ways. I'm not saying that they're choosing to be an addict. But again, I'm not saying, I would never say that. I'm not saying that they're choosing to be an addict. But the hard reality is that you cannot have, like, say you have a homeless shelter, okay? You got a homeless shelter and you got a bunch of people who are staying there. And a lot of them are actually getting clean. A lot of them are actually getting off drugs. And now they're going to the homeless shelter and they're passing their drug tests and they're doing the right thing. And they are moving on with their lives. They're getting shit together. And they're starting off, they're starting in the right direction. And then you decide to, oh, okay, well, actually, let's change the rules and let's let in the people who are drug addicts. We don't want to stop them from eating just because they're drug addicts, so let's let them in as well. Well, now, all of the people who are just getting off drugs, who are just getting clean, who are just starting to recover from their addiction, are now around a ton of other people who are still using, who are still doing drugs, who are openly using heroin and whatever else, meth, around these other people who are in the middle of getting clean and trying to get their lives back together. You'd fuck everything up for the few who are actually capable of moving on. You would fuck everything up for those who are actually trying to do better, because the people who are drug addicts, they're not going to do it. Take it from me. I was a heroin addict for a while, okay? I was on opiates for 5 years. I think in total, I was on heroin for somewhere from 2.5 to 3 years. I know what it's like. They are not going to do it. They're not going to get the job. They're not going to go to the interviews. They're not going to do the shit that they're supposed to do anyways, even if you say, let's just get rid of drug tests and let the addicts come in. They're not going to do it. So all you're doing is just bringing in a bunch of people who are not going to do the shit. They're not going to use the programs. They're not going to work the steps. And fucking it up for the few who are actually going to do it as well, and just getting them back on drugs and making it a lot harder for them to move on. You're just like, it's just a doubly bad option. So the lesser evil here is to say, you know what, we just have to drug test. We have to make sure that the people who are using are not coming in here. They're not ruining it for everybody else. And now we have a group of people who are actually going to use these programs and be successful off of them. This is how it works.
Public opinion and public attitude. And I'm willing to bet that the violent suppression of the state for these otherwise peaceful demonstrations, no matter how hard the media massages the narrative, will most likely lead to larger and larger demonstrations. There's only too many old white ladies that cops can brutalize because they're saying, don't do a genocide in my name, until the American public goes, holy shit, okay, this is too far. And the greatest example I can give you is that Israel, personally, had killed 200 humanitarian aid workers up until a couple of weeks prior. And obviously that kind of information wasn't really breaching the public consciousness as hard as when Israel killed 7 white aid workers from the World Central Kitchen. That was a big turning point where the majority, even of older people, said, all right, they've gone too far. This is unconscionable. This is, this is beyond the pale.
This is not true. That even if the numbers he's saying are correct, which I don't know that those numbers are right, but even if those numbers are correct, most of the bombings and shit that I had looked into and the aid workers that have been killed before, it was normally either some sort of collateral damage. It was Hamas sneaking shit in through aid workers and through their trucks and crap like that. Or there was intel that it was fake aid workers or pretending to be aid workers to try to get Hamas militants in, stuff like that. It was always, some other reason for bombing them. It wasn't to get rid of the aid. That didn't happen. They weren't just trying to bomb aid over and over. There were a couple of instances where it was I don't know, this one's weird. But the 7 trucks that were bombed recently, people didn't make a big deal about that because those people were white. I didn't even know they were white. I had no fucking idea that they were white. It just had to do with the unjustified nature of which it happened. That's it. That's all anybody cared about. I don't think any of us even knew that they were white.
And I suspect
that America pushes Israel so hard. I don't really understand the reason why. I mean, of course, it's probably just money, but it's very surprising for me to see it happen. It seems like it's almost there's a level of dissonance there, because
it comes from strategic interest, strategic importance. Israel is our forward operating base in a resource-rich region that we are very fond of having there. It's destabilizing power against all of these scary enemies that we have that shouldn't really be enemies at all, but we've declared them to be. So that's the reason. That's the major reason as to why we are so unconditionally offering full-throated support to Israel, no matter what the fuck they do.
I think that you're completely right, actually. And the reason why I said I don't know is because I'm happy to hear you say that, because I've always felt like kind of a conspiracy theorist that Israel exists basically to create unrest or destabilize the Middle East. So it's good. At least
it's a settler colony. It started off as a British settler colonial project, and it continued as we took over the torch from the British when we became the dominant global superpower, and we continued that exact same project. And that is the major role that Israel plays for us. It's not like Jews are powerful and monolithically, in a scary way controlling the media or some shit like that. It's just that Jews argue with one another all the fucking time. There's a significant.
I mean, you want to talk about putting money into rockets? Israel is one of the top innovators in rocket technology, drone technology, anti-rocket technology. They are coming up with tons of new military technologies all the time. One, because they're under attack all the time, so they just kind of need to do this shit. Two, because they have all of the space laser technology, of course, yes. The Jewish space lasers. I can't forget about that. But yeah, well, I mean, also, yeah, they have the top institutions over there and the most resources for these things. And they share all of this with their allies, the United States. We get all of the best shit all the time, pretty much before anybody else, because Israel gets it first and gives it to us. So it is not a total wasted venture. Also, we would expect our allies to come have our back, regardless of whether or not they think we're right, regardless of whether or not they think we're the good guys and, we're the ones who are morally justified. No, our allies are just supposed to have our backs. That's how this works. They're just supposed to do it. That's how we all put money into fucking NATO. We all do our part. Well, I mean, I say we all do it. I mean, really, it's just the United States. So, more than anything else, okay? Everybody else has to come to our aid because we're the fucking United States and we've just been paying for everybody else to be in NATO this entire time. So, you know, it doesn't matter whether or not we're right or whether or not they think we're moral. It just matters that they're our allies and they're supposed to come and have our backs. We're doing the same thing for Israel. And it is good that Biden is maybe putting a little bit more pressure on Israel to kind of change the game up a little bit and interact in a different way and maybe pull back some. But all in all, Israel's our ally. We're supposed to have their back. It's that simple.
Significantly larger group of American evangelical Zionists that are responsible for a lot more donations going into Israel, specifically in places like Texas, as a matter of fact, and all around, all those mega churches in your, around where you live, they are all way bigger dick riders of Israel, despite the fact that they hold anti-Semitic beliefs sometimes themselves.
I don't fucking understand it either, man. I don't.
It's a theological justification that they have. They believe that Jesus Christ is going to come back to earth and the rapture is going to happen, and that
they'll be good ones and they go to heaven.
Yeah, Jews will of course burn in hell in that process unless they convert to evangelical Christianity. But this is a good tactical ally for the time being in order to create the conditions for the rapture, which means that that entire land must be dominated by Jews and Jews only. So that's the overarching goal for a lot of evangelical Zionists in this country, and they far outnumber Jews. This is why I always say, if every single American Jew, and there's 6 million of them, decided tomorrow that like Israel's behavior is unconscionable.
Tom is giving Star Trek in that shirt. This is not my Star Trek shirt. This is my Star Trek shirt. This is my Bond villain shirt.
And they said, not in our name. We don't want this anymore. If every single Jew in America was anti-Zionist, Israel would still be allowed to operate in the exact same way, and America would still give Israel all of the fucking money and all of the political power to do whatever the fuck they want to do, because it doesn't have anything to do with American Jews as much as it has something to do with American interest in the region.
Yeah, no, I think that you're right. Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I said that in my chat. I mean, I even said, like, I don't know if this is going to be a bad take, but I wouldn't have been surprised if Israel knew that October 7th stuff was going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised if they let it happen.
I don't know.
This qualifies.
I wouldn't go that far. I mean, I think that it's their arrogance and their hubris that caused October 7th to happen. The arrogance that they think that they could have an apartheid and violently suppress 5 million Palestinians, 2.5 in Gaza in an open air prison, and 2.5 in the West Bank in permanent occupation with like steady rounds of pogroms and forcible expulsion from their own lands. Without incurring any sort of cost to their own security. Many other regional operatives actually informed the Israeli government, and they basically cast it aside, saying, Palestinians, they can't do shit. And it turns out they can actually do shit, and that you can't really keep.
It says they are a potential ally. What is it? When you say it, do you mean NATO? It says it says they are a potential ally. And I scrolled up through your other messages and I don't see you mentioning anybody else here. Sorry, that's at someone, but I don't know who. Oh, okay.
Keep pressuring people over and over again and trap them in like inhumane conditions and expect them not to lash out and retaliate. But it's that very same arrogance. But it is more so arrogance than some conspiracy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, that's why I was kind of curious. Like, what do you think is going to happen? Like, in 20 years? Like, what do you think the resolution of this is going to be?
I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I think that I've been covering Israel-Palestine publicly for the past 10 years. I've been a supporter of Palestinian emancipation, and I've never seen this level of Western support in my entire life. 10 years ago, if you said the things that I'm saying right now, immediately everyone would be like, oh, you're anti-Semitic, fuck off.
Yeah.
And that was very powerful. That was like that immediately would stop any kind of conversation because nobody wants to be called anti-Semitic. The fuck, especially in progressive circles. Like why?
Yeah.
And that is a true form of bigotry, obviously, and one that is ever present.
Well, that's what makes it even worse to accuse without it being true.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah,
and the fact that like while I was very critical of ADL for a very long time, the fact that there's like actual journalism being conducted on the Apartheid Defense League's hate crime statistics is like wild. This was something that like this was something that would be considered a non-starter. Even I would, if someone came to me fucking 5-6 years ago and we're like, let's look at the Jewish hate crime statistics. Actually, I'd be like, get the fuck out of here, dude. What kind of fucking Nazi shit is this?
Yeah.
And now you openly do see it though. Jonathan Greenblatt, the president of ADL, who very famously was caught caught in a phone conversation talking about the dangers that TikTok presents, has changed the designation.
Yeah, I think people normally say, I can't remember his name right now, the guy who ran Apple for a long time, Steve Jobs. People normally say that that this is my Steve Jobs look, and that's obviously what Elizabeth Holmes was trying to do. While she was trying to con everybody into thinking she was some sort of fucking, you know, what do you call it, big tech mogul. She was trying to look like Steve Jobs.
And directly change the designation of anti-Semitism to criticisms of Israel. Anytime someone sees a Jewish student, for example, sees a placard that says "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," or "Free Palestine," or whatever, that is now declared an anti-Semitic hate crime. Like, it is unconscionable to weaponize Judaism in an effort to defend the state of Israel and its awful actions against the Palestinian population and everyone around. It's ridiculous, especially when anti-Semitism does increase in times of Israel's like sieges and violent, abhorrent actions in general, like real anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I think that's what happens, right? And you see a lot of it on Twitter, right? I mean, you know, somebody I read is getting unbanned now, and so there's going to be a lot more of it.
Yeah, I mean, his little fucking Groyper shithead fan base is always all around. They've never stopped. So it's not
like
shocking. It's not shocking that Elon Musk would make such a decision. So I don't, you know, I think that is ridiculous. And Elon Musk is like the #1 free speech for me, not for the ass dude in general. He also claims to be a champion of free speech, but routinely suppresses speech that he doesn't like, that bother him. Talks about community notes.
Yeah, this is I don't, if you guys haven't seen, I just came out with a documentary recently, so you should go check it out. The best version is on Terminally Online Media. It's another channel that I have, TOM, Terminally Online Media. And I came out with a documentary over there, and throughout that documentary, it kind of outlines Candace Owens becoming more and more like a Groyper and like Nick Fuentes, and kind of changing over to their ideology. And it shows a lot of like the crossover that they have with the company that they keep and the people that they talk to. And then it shows a lot of crossover with the rhetoric that they use and the way that she more and more starts saying the same things as Nick Fuentes. And I mean, Matt Walsh recently tweeted this out, which while I was doing this project, after I finished the documentary, I started to realize that Matt Walsh is on a bit of a journey right now as well. So he might be the next documentary. But he tweeted out today, the vast majority of Republicans just voted for a bill to criminalize criticisms of the Israeli government. If the bill passes, you will be guilty of hate speech if you apply double standards to the government of Israel or accuse it of genocide. This is honestly one of the most insane pieces of legislation I've ever seen. This looks like it came from the ADL and the International Holocaust Alliance, I think is what they're called, the IHA something. I think there's a fourth letter, but the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. I think that's what it is, the IHRA. This looks like their website with these little half eyes or whatever they are. I'll look it up in a minute. I'm pretty sure that's where this is from, but you know, that would be ridiculous if we had hate speech laws in the United States. That would be Pretty unconstitutional. But Candace Owens quote tweeted this and said, "When are Christians going to wake up? First, professing that Christ is king during Easter week is anti-Semitic," which it was. It 100% was anti-Semitic. I'm more than proved this point throughout my documentary. It 100% is anti-Semitic. She says, now the true story of Christ's death is deemed anti-Semitic. The true story of Christ's death is deemed anti-Semitic. That's what she says. That's what she takes from this, is the true story of Christ's death is anti-Semitic, because right here it says, using the symbols and images associated with classic anti-Semitism, e.g., claims of Jews killing Jesus or blood libel, to characterize Israel or Israelis. That is fucking wild, dude. So she's straight up like, what? We're not allowed to characterize Israel and all Israelis as the people who murdered Jesus? Now they're even taking that away from us? What? Motherfuckers. The people alive today have absolutely nothing to do with killing Jesus. What is wrong with you? What is fucking wrong with you? What do you think that do you think that they lived from the Bible days all the way till today or something? What do you think happened? She loves to repeat to everybody all the time, I didn't own slaves. None of the white people today own slaves. I was never a slave. So why do people keep bringing it up? Why does it matter? None of us were ever slaves. None of the people living in fucking Israel killed Jesus, dude. None of them were alive. What happened? She said, Christians are being told that acknowledging our doctrine or history is a form of anti-Semitism. The Bible doesn't say that. The Bible doesn't say that. Fuck. This chick. The Bible doesn't say that.
But then literally will take down community notes from his own form of misinformation, and he does it in like very thin-skinned ways.
Notes. I am a huge fan of community notes.
Yeah, but community notes work if they're not, one, brigaded, and two, community notes work if you can also do community notes on Elon Musk or community notes on like the chain, for example. The cop after Columbia University showed up on Morning Joe and was like, "This is a chain that we found on all the doors in Hamilton Hall." And he claimed that was the reason why they believed that it was outside agitators that were participating in the sit-in, that were participating in the takeover of Hamilton Hall. The community notes immediately swarmed it and were like, "What the fuck are you talking about? That chain is literally on discount." That chain is literally on discount on the Columbia.
I'm not gonna get a soundboard. I can just add the sounds in. And I plan on it too, adding like whoosh, whoosh, whoo, whoo. Yeah, I plan on adding it. Like I added it to this screen.
Public safety website, and that community note perished suspiciously. So community notes in that situation, if you have it for some but not all, can still serve a very nefarious propaganda purpose. It makes you feel like there's counters. What's up?
If only one side is getting fact checked, then you might as well not do it.
Well, I mean, I'm in favor of community notes. I'm just saying that like
they should be
to always keep in consideration.
That, you know, if Elon Musk is deleting his own community notes, yeah, that's stupid as fuck. Absolutely.
Exactly. And I think that is like, because then there's a much more nefarious reason for community notes. So then it makes people falsely believe that, well, there's no community notes on this, so it must be real, right?
Yeah. Oh no, I think that definitely happens.
Yeah.
I mean, I like it, but I'm a fan of community notes, but I think that there are always going to be drawbacks to things, and I think that is one of them. You're right.
Just like free speech. There's always free speech for peaceful demonstration, peaceful protest when, you know, Nazis or whoever the fuck want to do it. But if you don't have it for the other side, if you don't have it for, you know, people who want to criticize Israel, even if they aren't being anti-Semitic, then all of a sudden,
about the was it like 2 days ago? Yeah, with like all those people attacking the encampment. Like, if you don't like the encampment, that's fine, but it's not your decision to make whether they should be there or not.
Yeah. But like I said, that's also why I don't believe that the university should have taken the actions that it took and then lied under false premises to the students to act like the police presence that they brought about the encampment was actually for their own good, for their own benefit, for their own safety. Be honest about it. Be like, yeah, we don't like that you fucking have a tent in the middle of the courtyard and we need you to shut the fuck up, please. I mean, I would of course still support the students and I would still get very mad, but ultimately, at least they be honest in why they're doing it.
I agree with you. And yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, it's a matter of degree. And, you know, to me, I think that, you know, some things are over the line. If you don't think that, then that's kind of like your opinion.
All right. This is just a Asmongold virtue signal session now. So